If you've ever called them sea dinosaurs, paleontologists will twitch. But let's be honest. When you're a bite-sized mammal adrift in the Cretaceous, the difference between a marine reptile and a true dinosaur won't matter. Tonight, we're diving into the ancient oceans to meet the animals that turned water into a weapon. Apex hunters tuned by millions of years of evolution to find things like you and end them fast. Before we sink, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments, then hold your breath. You won't need it for long. Picture a sea that cuts a continent in half. Sunlight slants down through green water thick with plankton. A slow blizzard of life and leftovers. The whole column breathing like a single creature. Schools of fish flicker and then vanish as if somebody turned the ocean to off. You're suspended at the surface, legs dangling, waving a polite hello to evolution. Under you, the dark goes from uneasy to please no. That feeling has a name. It's not fear of the deep. It's the deep noticing you. And the thing doing the noticing is shaped like a torpedo, powered by a tail fin sharpened into a crescent, and wrapped in pebbled scales that drink the light and give nothing back. Mosasaurus doesn't so much swim as it solves the water. The first thing you won't see is the silhouette. It stays below your sight line, pacing the boundary where the last photons die, banking that your mammal brain, raised on rivers and puddles, doesn't do 3 dimensions when it's stressed. It's an apex hunter that learned long ago that the surface is a buffet that pretends to be a mirror. A flick of that fluke and it's rising, not with the frantic wiggle of a lizard improvising, but with the calculated glide of a machine that has already done the arithmetic. The tail does the heavy lifting, the front flippers trim and steer, small corrections in a world where tiny mistakes get you unfriended by the fossil record. You've heard shark of the Cretaceous. Cute, shark's wish. This is a reptile, kin to monitor lizards and to snakes, that took one look at the land and said, "Pass me the ocean." Over millions of years it traded legs for paddles, ankles for hinges, and subtlety for a skull designed to end arguments. The head alone is a manifesto. Conical teeth line the jaws in clean repeating geometry, each one a polished claim on the future. Behind them, because nature loves overkill, sit extra teeth on the roof of the mouth, pterygoid rails that angle prey backward with every bite. You do not back out of a mosasaur. The jaws don't just open, they deploy. A flexible joint at the front of the lower jaw lets the halves spread, making room for big, thrashing packages labelled ambition. The skull is braced for torque, the neck short and brutal, built to shake and wrench. Think of it less as biting and more as asset liquidation. Those famous bite marks on turtles, fish, even other marine reptiles? That's not aggression, that's accounting. You imagine it as a monster that charges everything at once. It doesn't. The ambush is clinical. The animal holds station under the glare line, letting the shimmer of the surface hide it like camouflage made of physics. A turtle paddles by, a floating lunchbox in the age before lids. A shadow slides up through the sheen. Acceleration happens. There isn't time for a flinch, there's barely time for a ripple. The hit is from below, all tail, all momentum. A spearhead tipped with a skull the length of your arm span. The first contact disorients, the second revises history. If bone crunches, that's incidental music. It has to breathe air. Yes, the ocean's worst news still carries lungs, but that doesn't help you. A quick ascent, a stealthy gulp, a roll of the torso, and it vanishes again, holding oxygen like a promise while the clock runs only for you. Every surfacing is a memory of sky, not a weakness. Watch long enough and you'll see the cadence, measured rises, the quiet sinks, the spiral turn that puts its right eye up toward the glare, and it's left down in the world of consequences. It doesn't waste motion, it doesn't need drama. Drama is what the prey provides. The body plan is the punchline of a long, mean joke. The torso is deep and muscular, the spine a flexible beam that channels power into the tail. The flippers don't flap like a bird, they feather and trim them, slicing micro-corrections through a medium that punishes waste. The skin, where we found impressions, is tiny scaled, hydrodynamic, the kind of surface engineering that would make a yacht designer feel underdressed. Some specimens even hint at countershading. Darker above, paler below. In this universe, camouflage doesn't hide you. It shortens the conversation. Diet. Everything that fits and some things that don't. Fish flash and disappear down a moving hallway of teeth. Squid spiral into silence. Turtles shatter like collectible plates you shouldn't have touched. There are plesiosaur bones with punctures arranged in tidy jaw-shaped patterns, like someone stamped property of Mosasaurus across the fossil. You can picture it rolling with the carcass, jaws locked, the water around it turning opaque as oils and proteins bloom into a slick. That little gyre in the sea? That's what digestion looks like from the outside. Juveniles didn't lurk in coastal nurseries like timid interns. Tiny mosasaurs show up in the same offshore deposits as the big ones, suggesting the ocean was cradle, classroom and cafeteria. Imagine being born already halfway to problem, in a world where everything either has teeth or is thinking about renting some. You come into the light, blink once and start swimming with intent. Childhood is a modern luxury. You think sound will save you, it won't. The ocean is loud, shrimp crackle, fish drum, waves complain to the sandbar, and the hunter below has zero interest in broadcasting. It doesn't need a dorsal fin slicing the surface to announce itself, or a horror movie theme, or bubbles. You get silence and then geometry. A shape that wasn't there and then is, resolving out of the water like a negative photograph. Maybe you catch the white of a throat as the jaw opens. Maybe you notice the eyes, set to the sides, not pleading, not angry, just working. Prey-sized reflections dance across the cornea. That's the last time you'll be an idea. When it feeds, the head does small, efficient violence while the rest of the body stays calm, conserving the currency that matters most in a cold-blooded calculus: energy. The ribs cradle the engine, the tail keeps the ledger. There is no waste, no flair, no showmanship. Evolution doesn't applaud, it balances equations. Even the teeth tell you what kind of story you're in. They grow replacements inside the jaw, new points forming like bad intentions, moving upward as the old ones crack and scar. In some species, those crowns are smooth and predatory. In others, cousins in the same broader clan, the teeth bulge and blunt for crushing shells. Specialization stacked on top of ruthlessness. The message is simple. Pick a niche, master it, expand your stomach's definition of possible. People imagine these seas as open deserts with the occasional set piece, not here. The western interior seaway was crowded. Ammonites spiraled through the mid-water, seabirds dive-bombed, schools braided the water column into ribbons of muscle. And threading it all, the mosasaurs, more than one kind overlapping like apex Venn diagrams. Some were long-skulled rams, some were compact wrecking balls. The big name, the one on your nightmares, is just the marquee predator at the end of a branching reptile tree that figured out collectively how to be faster, meaner in 3 dimensions. You may be thinking, what if I stay perfectly still? Terrible plan. These animals didn't hunt movement so much as they hunted circumstance. A silhouette at the surface is a silhouette at the surface, whether it's twitching or preying. And if you sink to escape, congratulations, you've entered the layer where the water is cold, the light is treason, and the hunters are built to read it like text. Those enormous eyes aren't sentimental, they're instruments. That split-second flash you called a glint, optics doing their job. Sometimes the kill leaves traces, a gouged turtle carapace, a plesiosaur vertebra with tooth pits like exclamation marks. Coprolites, fossilized droppings packed with fish scales and bone shards, the fine print of a contract signed in calcium. You can stand in a museum and follow the story backward. Tooth to bone to behaviour, behaviour to an instant you would not have survived long enough to misinterpret. Stand at the surface again, the wind has freshened, the inland sea smiles small white smiles. You're scanning for dorsal fins because you were trained by modern fears. Nothing breaks the skin. A shadow arranges itself below. Length measured not in meters but in the number of bad decisions you can make in a breath. There's a pressure change, or maybe that's your heart forgetting its job. The water lifts, just a touch, as something big displaces it with intent. In the last fraction of a second, when your instincts are screaming about the wrong century, the jaw opens wider than seems necessary. There are no words after this, only hydrodynamics and leverage, the snapping of an ancient hinge closing on the present. The ocean seals its envelope. Evolution licks the stamp. And you, a very temporary visitor in a permanent system, finally understand why definitions don't matter down here. Call it a marine reptile, call it a sea dinosaur, the water calls it efficient. The Western Interior Seaway pretends to be a lake with good manners. Flat light, a chalky hush. Gulls, the prehistoric kind with teeth, skimming the glare. But under that plight surface, the water has corridors, lanes of warm and cold sliding past each other like slow traffic. And in one lane, something long and deliberate is keeping time with your heartbeat. You're a silhouette from below, two dangling flags attached to a soft, curious torso. In this ocean, you are a notification, and here comes the thing that answers, a 12-plus meter reptile with the vibe of a torpedo and the face of a battering ram. Tylosaurus doesn't ask. It arrives. You can recognize it by the nose even if you don't get the luxury of recognition. The snout is reinforced bone, an armoured prow that juts past the teeth like a promise. Engineers would call it a crumple-resistant impact surface. Evolution calls it, what if the first hit isn't a bite? Most predators lead with mouth. This one sometimes leads with momentum. That blunt rostrum turns high speed into a punctuation mark. The body behind it is all solutions, deep-chested, muscular, ribs bracketing a machine built to hold air and convert it into long, controlled violence. The tail ends in a diamond-shaped fluke that behaves like an opinion, it drives everything. Fore flippers and hind flippers don't flap so much as they steer. Little edits to a sentence that's already perfect. It needs to breathe, sure. It surfaces the way a submariner checks a periscope. Quick, discreet, and mostly to confirm the sky hasn't gone anywhere. Then it slides back beneath the mirror, settling where the last light dissolves into rumour. This is the strike zone. Up here, anything that floats becomes geometry. Roughly oval turtle, panic triangle bird, sleek question mark plesiosaur neck. You're not prey yet. You're a shape that trips an algorithm. Below, the head tilts. One eye angles up, one down, a habit borrowed from animals who live where the world divides into glare and dark. It reads the surface like a page, and you're the typo it cannot leave alone. The first movement is not dramatic. It tightens the S-curve in its spine, lets the fluke draw a single, unshowy line through the water, and goes from ghosting to present with terrifying professionalism. The ram isn't a wild slam, it's a calculation. Target, a diving bird with saw-toothed jaws. Picture a lethal penguin cosplaying a loon, busy chasing fish and not in the mood to be the fish. The bird streaks down in bubbles. Tylosaurus rises in silence. Boom contact. Not enough to shatter, enough to scramble. The bird pinwheels, dazed, and the battering ram has already become a mouth. Double hinged jaws unscroll like a mechanism. conical teeth set in neat, repeating rows, and the real party trick palatal teeth on the roof of the mouth grip and ratchet prey backward like a moving walkway to oblivion. Head first to avoid snagging wings. 1 gulp, 2 flexes, gone. The bubbles are still rising when the surface settles. Somewhere above, you reassure yourself, probably just a wave. How do we know? The rock keeps receipts. Fossil guts, coprolites, fossilized droppings packed with bird bones and fish scales tell on it bluntly. Stomach contents from Dinosaurs have come up with a buffet list. Diving birds, sharks, bony fish, even pieces of other marine reptiles. An apex predator is not picky, it is thorough. The rostrum isn't just a battering ram for prey that needs persuasion. It's also a handle for a messy world, a way to nudge, flip and pin. Imagine a turtle sunning like a smug dinner plate. A quick rise, a controlled tap to roll it, a grip on the softer underside. Problem reframed as solution. The battering hypothesis isn't just poetic license. That toothless, reinforced tip does things teeth can't. Strike without snagging, stun without letting go, redirect without tearing. Teeth are commitment, the rostrum is negotiation. Hit, pivot, bite. 3 steps executed in less time than it takes your brain to rename screaming as strategy. If you're hoping to hear a warning first, understand that the ocean has great acoustics for everything except what's about to hurt you. This isn't a shark's fin slicing daylight. It's a shape that refuses to exist until impact. There's a plesiosaur here, too. Long neck. Paddles like a metronome set too slow. The plesiosaur has range. It can keep prey at the end of a living fishing pole, snap forward, retract, reset. You might assume long neck beats, ramming snout. You would be very optimistic. Tylosaurus angles underneath and past, not chasing the head but reading the torso, looking for the centre of mass, the place where a shove becomes a spin. The ram lands like a mean idea. The plesiosaur rolls. The neck becomes a lever against its own body. The flippers scramble into useless circles. The second act is a bite along the ribs, a wrench that turns structure into conversation, and the third act is quiet as the predator settles into rotational feeding, twisting, tearing, reducing. Sharks arrive late to nibble the margins, thinking the seers are getting away with something. They're chaperoned by teeth marks. You want a defense plan. Tylosaurus wants your plan to include stay still, swim fast, or hide near the surface. Those are 3 problems it has spent geological time practicing. Near-surface silhouettes are home field advantage. Fast swimming, prey trigger pursuit that feels unfair. A tail this strong turns a single stroke into acceleration you can't comprehend, and a body this streamlined turns corners like a rumour slipping through a crowd. As for hiding, the thermocline draws a line in the water where temperatures change. Animals gather along it like mall shoppers on an escalator. Guess who patrols the escalator? The skin, where it's preserved, was pebble-scaled and hydrodynamic. A texture designed to make the water part and then forget the conversation. Countershading likely painted it dark above and pale below, which in this light makes invisibility a practical hobby. From the side, it's a classic mosasaur. Deep belly, muscular shoulders fading into that strict tail. But the head gives it away. Long, sleek, the knob that gave the genus its name, pushing the profile from predator to projectile. Child, you doodled sharks with exclamation point noses. Adult, you learned the exclamation point existed and had an agenda. It was born to the water, literally. Mosasaurs didn't drag themselves ashore to lay eggs like awkward crocodiles dressing for a beach party. Their bodies tell a different story. Hips reduced, limbs retooled into paddles, a pelvis that laughs at the idea of walking. Evidence from mosasaur relatives shows live birth at sea, little hunters arriving tail first, inhaling their first breath under a sky they will visit only in quick, efficient sips. There's no nursery cove with soft sand and patient tides. The open ocean is daycare, cafeteria, and exam room. If juveniles swam the same offshore corridors as adults, and the rock suggests they did, then childhood was simply smaller with teeth. Sometimes the ocean writes scenes even a jaded narrator would call a bit much. Storms rake the seaway, the surface becomes broken glass, carcasses loosen from the chalk cliffs and drift like grim confetti. Tylosaurus cruises along the windrows, sampling, testing, tasting. Scavenging isn't beneath it. Hierarchy is for animals with spare time. A dead fish 3 meters long is still calories. A half-rotten plesiosaur is a buffet with less kicking. If it shows up while another predator feeds, the rostrum returns to customer service. A nudge that becomes a suggestion that becomes a vacancy. Sharks peel away in offended spirals, mouthing complaints they can't afford to pursue. You wonder whether it hunted alone. The fossil record is stingy with social calendars, but corpses with multiple bite marks tell us at least this. More than one could be there without a scheduling conflict. Coordinate? Maybe. Tolerate? Definitely, if the carcass is large and the returns outweigh the risk. Nobody here wants to mistake a colleague for a menu item, but if it happens, well, the stomach contents are honest about mistakes. Let's pretend you're not a panicking primate out of time, but a respectable Cretaceous animal. Something with mass and options. Let's make you a turtle the size of a suitcase. You cruise the thermocline because that's where your salads live. The water thickens, the light softens, all fine. You feel a touch gentle for the ocean, tilting you just enough to paint the sky where the seafloor should be. It's weird. You kick to correct. The kick is exactly what the thing below is waiting for. Muscles flex, jaws catch the margin, the world narrows to a vice, and a vibration as your carapace becomes a case study in how much force bone can take before it changes its mind. You never see the eyes. You don't need to. The rostrum was the conversation, the bite is the signature. Now, replace turtle with you floating on driftwood, congratulating yourself on your ancient survival instincts. Something nudges the log, not hostile, not even curious, just testing the world the way a professional taps a wall to hear its secrets. The second nudge is not a nudge. The log slews. Your balance translates into hunger at scale. The water cinches around your ankles. The shape rising under you is all culture, shock and outline. A living missile. A long pale line along the jaw. An upper surface that erases the sun. The battering ram kisses the wood one last time, the wood spins away, and the mouth that follows is a hallway with teeth. Front row, then the moving floor on the roof that says please proceed. You proceed. Up top the seaway keeps its composure. The wake narrows, the ripples lose interest, the chalk dust settles. The corridors of warm and cold slide on, full of fish and birds and optimism. And somewhere below, a predator with a built-in punctuation mark glides back into the green, writing its one-syllable story on anything unlucky enough to share a page. The Arctic is supposed to be quiet. Even in the Jurassic, when the world ran a fever and ice forgot how to be ice, high latitudes did their long day, long night thing. Months of dusk, months of light, a sky that couldn't make up its mind. Out on the Svalbard Seaway, the water looks like a hammered mirror. The wind toys with it and then leaves. Birds that don't exist anymore trace stitching across the surface and then fold into it gone. Somewhere below, the depth loses colour and then it loses patience. What you feel first is the shape of the cold. It presses from underneath, not because the sea is winter, but because it is layered. A slick of warmer brine sliding over a heavier, darker pane. Those panes are traffic lanes. You're drifting in a place where density decides who lives and who is lunch. And pacing the boundary, a shadow keeps piecewise time with your breath. Short neck, Enormous head, 4 flippers like scimitars, already turning the water into a plan. You're thinking shark? You're wrong. This thing doesn't wag a tail like a metronome, flies underwater. The 4 flippers and hind flippers bite the water, carve it, release it. A 4-stroke engine built from bones and muscle instead of pistons and regret. Each stroke makes lift, not just thrust, which means it can surge and then stop and then pivot around you as if you're a punctuation mark it forgot to place earlier. The body between those wings is compact and heavy, an honest torpedo. The neck is an afterthought. The head is the thesis. It was found here, its bones salted into black shale that cracks like stale pastry. Plesiosaurus, the short-necked tyrant of the plesiosaur world, a reptile that traded grace for guillotine, some of them a nickname like comic book villains, the specimen that made headlines as Predator X before we gave it a proper label. The skull alone is a sermon, thick where forces meet, ridged where tendons once anchored, a bite you don't walk off. The jaws hinge open and the teeth, banana thick enamel flashing like whetstone, stand in 2 careful rows. Not cutting edges, not delicate filigree. These are stakes driven into a problem until the problem stops being a problem. Picture the hunt the way physics would tell it. The plesiosaur parks below the glare line, where upward vision turns the surface into a greasy sheet of light. The eyes are forward biased compared to the long-necked kin, more overlap, more depth sense, because when your business model is grab and maim, you want to know exactly where the target ends and your teeth begin. It watches, it measures, it trims with tiny wrist flicks you can't see because your brain doesn't have a category for a wrist on a flipper. It is quiet because it has no reason to be anything else. Prey here runs large. Ichthyosaurs cruise like living torpedoes with living torpedoes inside, embryos lined up like beads. Long-necked plesiosaurs stitch lazy zigzags through them mid-water, heads at the end of flexible question marks as they hunt small things that gather in enormous numbers. It doesn't matter which one you are in this casting call. Something above you is a silhouette, and something below you has made a promise to erase it. The first move is never the mouth. The first move is position, roll, angle, and alignment between the plane of the flippers and the axis of the skull that turns the whole animal into a single argument. Then, 1 hard beat from all 4 wings, acceleration punches through you like a weather change. The water around the pliosaur tightens, the wake forms a braided V. You feel the pressure wall come first, like the airless moment before a door slams. Impact is mouth, yes, but it is also math. The bite lands not where the prey is, but where it will be when the bite is finished opening. The upper jaw is a roof with bad intentions, the lower is a lever. Thickened at the front because sometimes the lever needs to take a kick without breaking. Teeth sink, not delicate slicers, posts that resist bending, built to hold while the rest of the head moves. And the head moves. Side to side, then a roll. Death roll is a crocodile's PR term, but torsional feeding is older than that. The neck is short so the torque isn't lost, the shoulders catch and transfer the twist. Slabs of meat decide to be ribbons because they don't have another option. What's it like up close? The skin would have been pebbled, like small tiles glazed in seawater. The flippers are all business, knuckle bones and finger bones strung in straight lines under a sheath of muscle. Each limb flexes at the shoulder, at the elbow that isn't an elbow, at the wrist that isn't a wrist, and those joints are locked into ranges that make sense underwater. No splay, no wasted angle. Think of an aircraft wing that can shrug. Cold water warm hunter. Not warm like a mammal with a furnace and opinions maybe, but warm enough. Big bodies keep their heat, and there's a decent chance the metabolism here was tuned higher than you'd expect from reptile. Call it mesothermy if you like, or just call it unfair. Seasonal darkness, fine. The eyes are braced by sclerotic rings, bony donuts that support big lenses. Visibility isn't a luxury, it's a tool. In summer, the sun skates and never sits. In winter, the light leaves, but the sea remains stocked. This animal is a system built to harvest both seasons without caring about the weather report. There's etiquette in death. The bite marks on contemporaries, on ichthyosaurs, on the long-necked cousins, stack into patterns like signatures. Deep punctures near the limb girdles where leverage is best. Shallow scrapes along the ribs where teeth slipped after bone yielded. Jaws can pry, jaws can crush. But the best story is in the broken pieces of other predators found inside these skulls' arc, in the coprolites ironed into the shale, glittering with fish scales, squid hooks, and the grit of someone else's big day gone very small. The gut was not a snob. Now, imagine you're drifting in the milky green corridor. Not a trespasser from the future, but a respectable local, say a juvenile ichthyosaur, sleek and smug on speed. You bank to chase a school at pinwheels in a way that tickles your instincts. You forget the third dimension because you're young, and the whole ocean seems like a racetrack made just for your kind of arrogance. The shadow that kisses your dorsal line is subtle, like a cloud remembering to be a cloud. Then the world simply bites you. Not all of you, just enough to change everything. The pressure is surgical. The twist is the part you'll remember if you're allowed to remember anything. You won't be. Or, trade species, be a long-necked plesiosaur, each stroke of your 4 flippers a neat symmetric diagram. Your head lances forward to sip a fish. The fish agrees with your plan. You're already thinking about the next one when the ocean buckles under your sternum. The pliosaur didn't aim for the neck. It aimed for the place where a shove turns into a roll. Your paddles find no purchase because the water offers no walls. The bite lands along your flank, then a second bite higher toward the spine, a third across the shoulder girdle. When the jaws release, it isn't mercy, it's strategy. You're structurally worse now, you're easier to hold later. People love to ask whether these things hunted alone. The rocks won't give you an RSVP list, but they imply a crowd. Svalbard's shale is a mass graveyard where bodies met mud in great numbers. You can picture several of these machines at a carcass in the dim, 4 wings apiece drawing calm circles while their heads do the rude work. No shouting, no splashing. Each twist of a skull peels the world into manageable strips. Sharks, sleek ones you'd respect in any century, wait at a respectful distance the way street dogs wait outside a butcher's, not so much hopeful as patient. The plesiosaurs ignore them. They have no rival to impress and no friend to disappoint. Surface behaviour? Brutal minimalism. Lungs need air, so the animal must meet the sky. It does this without ceremony. A black cut opens in the mirror. A low dome of head rises. Nostrils sip a short idea of atmosphere. The cut closes. If you were scanning for threat the way a modern beachgoer does, looking for visible fins, you would certify this ocean safe. The danger here is not a billboard. It's punctuation under the line break. You can ask about speed, and numbers will be tossed around as if anyone is measuring a fossil with a radar gun. What you need to know is simpler. It moves fast enough to end whatever it starts. Analyse the flipper bones, the muscle scars, the lever arms of the jaw. Everything is tuned for explosive motion and a bite that pays for itself. Sustained sprints? Unlikely. Ambush acceleration and short pursuit? That's the portfolio. Even the way it grew tells on its life. Bone histology hints at steady, purposeful addition, not the frantic boom and bust of a creature surviving on luck. Juveniles were not gifts. They were prototypes with sharp edges. Live birth in the water skips the clumsy crawling egg stage. You arrive into a world already at full volume, tail first so you don't drown in your first second, and then you swim. Childhood as a service plan. No refunds, no training wheels, nothing between you and the lesson but distance. Sometimes the ocean gets theatrical, even here. A storm peels along the fjord that isn't a fjord yet, lashes the surface into teeth. A floating carcass tumbling end over end, the remains of something respectable, knocks against a chalky shoal and pauses. The plesiosaur rises under it not like a monster but like a crane. Jaw open, it lifts, adjusts, lets the mass slide, then bites just once, decisively into the place where ligaments argue with gravity. The carcass yields. The sea's confetti of oils and proteins blossoms. Birds peck at the margins, irritated when a hump of water swells and an enormous back claims the centre again. You watch all this from a safe decade and call it behaviour. At the time, nobody called it anything. They were too busy not being alive. There's always the human tendency to overdo the legend, to stretch the length, to line up the teeth like railroad spikes, to speak about the most and the biggest until numbers turn into spells. You can skip the exaggeration. 12 metres of apex reptile, 4 hydrofoils, a skull the size of a kitchen table, teeth you could park a small nightmare on. Truth is plenty. Where myth wants a dragon, the fossil gives you a function. What does it here? Maybe less than that you want. Sound travels well down here, but these skulls are hammers. Thick, braced, uninterested in subtle vibration. What does it smell? The nose opens high near the air. A good place to sip scent when you surface. But underwater, taste and chemical gradients do their slower, stranger work. What does it feel? Pressure? Movement? The whole body is an instrument for the water's moods. Picture the flippers as hands reading braille in a library that never closes. You keep waiting for a mistake it could make. That's your hope, that everything has a glitch. The plesiosaur obliges in the way all big hunters do. It's extended to run. It lives by margins, by caloric math. Miss too many hits and your muscle is suddenly an investment you can't service. But miss too many is a phrase for prey animals with strategies. You're not a prey animal with strategies. You're an upright noise with soft parts, imagining the rules apply. Down where the green turns to graphite, the plesiosaur turns a half circle and sits in its own slipstream. It does nothing for a long, practical minute. Those huge flippers hover, twitch, reset. The head makes a tiny correction. If you were beside it, you would hear muscle underwater, a faint creak like leather, a closing and opening of doors far away. You're not beside it. You're above it, exactly where the hard math becomes short poetry. The ocean remains calm. That's the trick. Predators that make a fuss advertise their intentions. This one prefers clauses that end quickly. Something is about to become history. The guillotine rises once, smoothly to where the light becomes a lie. Then it drops. Australia's inland sea doesn't crash or roar. It hums. A flat, bright, chalk green hush stretching from horizon to horizon. The kind of water that pretends to be friendly while collecting debts you didn't know you owed. The Eromanga Sea lies across the continent like a lazy mirror, warm and shallow in places, dropping into lanes of darker brine where everything serious happens. You float over it like punctuation the sentence hasn't decided it needs. Beneath you, the water develops an opinion. The outline assembles in pieces. First the shadow, compact body, short neck, and a head that does not negotiate. 4 flippers, the front pair broad like shields turned into wings, the hind pair narrower, all of them catching water and throwing it behind in invisible sheets. This is not a tail wagger. This is underwater flight. A 2-stroke rhythm up front with the back pair keeping time, the whole machine able to accelerate without telegraphing intent. You can feel that speed before you see it, the way pressure leans into your eardrums as if the ocean just inhaled. The skull is where the story stops being polite. It's a fortress of bone with doors that open only one way. The temporal arches, great bridges over the cheeks, frame windows for jaw muscles thick enough to have personalities. The lower jaw meets itself in a long sutured handshake at the front, a welded seam called the symphysis that refuses to flex when force arrives. The jaw joint sits low and stout, a hinge built like a hinge should be when failure means starving. The teeth aren't blades, they're stakes, conical and circular in cross-section, some with subtle ridges, planted deep in sockets so the bite can hold while the rest of the skull does violence. Bite force problem is what happens when you try to turn all that into a single number. Engineers squint at lever arms and muscle scars. Paleontologists argue decimals. The rock shrugs and offers punctured ribs, shattered shoulder girdles, turtle shells that learned what certainty is. For you, the only math that matters. It surfaces like a rumour. Quick dome of head, nostrils up, one breath, gone. Lungs want air, but dignity wants silence. There's no dorsal fin as a courtesy flag, no cutting triangle to warn you. It prefers the border between glare and shadow, where your mammal eyes turn the surface into a skin you trust too much. Below that skin it hangs at a slope, one eye tilted up to read brightness, the other keeping score in the green. It is patient the way gravity is patient. What swims here is worth eating in units, not mouthfuls. Thick-bodied fish with crescent tails cruise like crossbow bolts. Ammonites spiral through the column, their shells flashing like coiled moons. They are the snack food that fights back only once. Ichthyosaurs, sleek dolphinish torpedoes, break the water in tight arcs and vanish, their bellies crowded with unborn echoes. Long-necked plesiosaurs stitch their way along the thermocline like awkward aristocrats, heads darting at small fish while their bodies pretend they aren't enormous. And then there's you, legs dangling, offering evolution an experiment it didn't ask for. Position is the first weapon. The predator slides under and past, aligning itself with your centre of mass the way a locksmith finds the pins he can't see. One hard beat from those front flippers, lift turns into lunge, and the skull writes its opening argument across something's future. The bite doesn't land where the prey is, it lands where the prey will be after the flippers have already started slowing down. Ambush wrapped in anticipation. Teeth sink, not slicing, not nibbling, commitment. Then the head does what the head was built for, a lateral wrench, or a tight roll that turns a slab into a ribbon. People call it a death roll. When crocodiles audition the move, here it's just standard operating procedure, torsional feeding as old as the bad idea of being edible. There's museum lore about this animal that feels like a metaphor. In the mid-20th century, a spectacular skeleton was mounted with an enthusiastic number of plaster vertebrae, stretching the body into an elegant too-long monster that owned a wall and your imagination. Decades later, we learned what the bones already knew. It's shorter, stockier, more brutal. The skull is still a table's length of decision-making. The body behind it is a power plant, not a runway. You don't need 12+ meters to make the see-through you're going away party. 10 honest meters with 4 hydrofoils and a bite that treats bone like a suggestion. Truth beats rumour. Think of the shoulder girdle as a keel set into muscle. Each 4 flipper is an arm that forgot how to be a hand and became something better. A stack of long finger bones bound into a stiff paddle, the wrist and elbow refactored into joints that flex only in useful arcs. The chest is deep, the spine a beam that never met a torque it didn't want to transfer. Behind, the hind flippers feather and stab, adding thrust when needed, pivoting the whole machine the way little thoughts pivot big decisions. Everything visible outside is there to serve what you can't see. Energy in, power out, waste minimized. It eats what dares move with dignity. Marine turtles rise like smug saucers to breathe. The predator comes up beneath and to the side and tap flips the geometry so the vulnerable underside says hello. A single bite at the bridge of the shell where bone thins under the shoulder. A twist, and the hinge between living and not remembers which way it swings. Long-necked plesiosaurs, Their strength is reach, their weakness is leverage. The big skull ignores the head at the end of the fishing pole and clamps the trunk, then uses the victim's own neck as a lever against its body. You can picture the flippers of the victim paddling beautifully, pointlessly, script perfect and physics useless, while the water fills with the taste of iron and history. Sharks show up because sharks always do, sleek Cretaceous lamniforms with ideas of their own, but they behave like ambitious interns at a board meeting, hanging just far enough back to keep their job after someone bigger clears their throat. This hunter doesn't need to posture at them. A roll of the bulk, a twitch of the flippers, a slow open close of the jaws that says "I am the agenda." The sharks carve little crescents out of the edges and celebrate later. The sea isn't all ambush. Sometimes it's project management. A storm veers across the seaway. The surface breaks into a million unhelpful suggestions. Carcasses loosen from the chalk beds and lift like unhappy balloons. The hunter cruises the rack lines where driftwood, dead squid and regret gather, tasting with open mouth, testing with teeth, rejecting with a bored shake when the yield is low. Scavenging isn't shame, it's economy. Efficiency is the only morality anyone here can afford. Bone histology whispers growth stories. Steady deposition, not the sawtooth pattern of feast and famine that punishes the almost apex. Large animals in warm seas get to keep their heat without paying constant rent. Call it mesothermy if you want a suit and tie word, or call it able to sprint in water that would make a crocodile nap. The eyes are ringed with bony braces that keep big lenses honest under pressure. Daylight in Australia can be a hammer. Twilight can be a rumour. Both are readable. Sound travels far, but this skull is a hammer too. Thick, braced, not built to eavesdrop on whispers. Doesn't need whispers, it watches pressure. It reads motion. The sea tells it everything it respects. If you insist on numbers, the sea offers receipts instead. Ribs with gouges that match the spacing of those conical teeth. Turtle carapaces with bite marks where shell tried, briefly, to be an answer. Fossilized gut contents glittering with fish scales, squid hooks, shards of bone. The fine print of violent contracts. Coprolites pressed into stone like dark commas, unrolling their glitter under a museum light while a 5-year-old points and learns a new, thrilling word. It didn't lay eggs on a beach. The pelvis is reduced, the hips a shrug at the very idea of land. Its clan gave birth in the water, tail first, lungs last. Little hunters unrolled into a school without corners. No nursery bay, no kindergarten lagoon. Open ocean from minute one. Imagine arriving into a world where everything either has a beak, a hook, or a policy, and the only thing you can do about any of it is swim in straight lines and eat. Failure is an education other animals get to have. Now pretend generously that you belong here. You're a broad-backed fish with a tail that thinks it's a scythe, patrolling the boundary where the light turns to math. Heat pools under your skin, muscles fire on time. A school of smaller fish braids itself into a promise ahead. You commit. The water thickens, the pressure wave of something larger deciding to intersect your story. You bank. The shadow does not bank, it adjusts. There is a clean mechanical moment where the jaw opens and the world inside it becomes the only relevant geography. Teeth meet. Time subtracts. When your body tries to twist out of it, the skull obliges and twists faster. Or be a plesiosaur with ideas about dignity. Your head darts, your neck flows, your flippers draft invisible shapes you could draw with your eyes closed. You sense the big one a heartbeat too late, not as a shape, but as a correction in the water that your nerves mislabel as current. Then there is a weight applied not to you but through you, as if the ocean decided to use you as a handle. Somewhere in the distance of your own body, bone stops believing in itself. The predator releases, catches again higher up, and the second bite isn't a kill, it's the end of your plan. Up above, the Eromanga looks like it's having a good day. Sunlight paints the surface in small bright lies. Birds with teeth stitch across the glare and take numbers on the slick below, complaining to each other like they invented commentary. The big reptile breaks the mirror long enough to refill the world inside its ribs, then slides under, leaving nothing a sensible animal would panic about. You could watch that breath from a boat and feel reassured. You could mark the spot and not find it again in a minute because it won't be there. The sea doesn't do marks, it does habits. You keep waiting for noise, a splash, a thrash, something cinematic to honour the drama. But this isn't a stage, it's a spreadsheet. Energy spent must come back with interest. Showmanship is a tax. The flippers draw their clean arcs. The head writes its short clauses. And in the green below the chalky hush, something that believes in leverage more than mercy closes its mouth and finishes a thought it started 100 million years ago. The Jurassic Sea doesn't sparkle, it smoulders. A bruise-coloured canopy of cloud presses low over a wide, warm shelf where England will one day pretend to be land. The water tastes of silt and calcium, chalk dust dissolving into a green that swallows detail. Belemnites drift like loaded darts. Ammonites coil and uncoil rhythm into the current. Hybodont sharks write small cursive in the midwater and then cross their own names out. And somewhere beneath the glare line, something short-necked and long-mouthed is busy deciding which shape above it will stop being a shape. You've heard the arguments. Is it 6 meters, 7, 10 if you use squint and add wishful thinking? People get into fistfights over tape measures as if centimetres could save them. The TV once turned it into a sea dragon that could swallow boats for fun. Paleontologists showed up afterward with calipers like disappointed parents. Nice story. Here's what the bones say. The bones describe a compact torpedo with a head that refuses to be a supporting character. Call it Leopleurodon, if you like proper names while being eaten. The silhouette builds itself in the mind before it builds itself in the water. 4 flippers like scimitars, the front pair broad and authoritative, the rear pair a quieter echo. A barrel of a torso meant to hold air and opinions, a neck so short it's practically an apology, and a skull that reads like a thesis defence. Conical teeth stand in 2 perfect files, each one the diameter of a respectable thumb, each one seated deep for when jaw becomes vice and vice becomes strategy. The temporal arches, those bony bridges over the cheeks, cage muscles that would rather not be measured. The lower jaws meet in a long, fused handshake at the front, because flex is for prey. If you want to know how it moves, watch the water, not the animal. The flippers don't churn, they slice. Each forelimb sweeps down and back, then feathers up, shedding vortices like secrets. The hind flippers trim and torque, adding snap to a pivot, or letting the animal hang in its own slipstream, perfectly still like a thought that refuses to be rushed. There's no tail wag to telegraph intent, no dorsal to betray direction. It flies underwater, which is deeply unfair in a medium that already wants to own you. The Oxford Clay Sea is a buffet with lighting that flatters nothing. Ichthyosaurs arrow through it like living harpoons, sliding past one another, with the baffled arrogance of things built for speed. Long-necked cousins, plesiosaurs with foolishly elegant necks, dab for fish in neat little lunges, as if feeding politely could make them less edible. Marine crocodiles with sail-shaped tails, sleek, salt-tolerant thugs, patrol the shallows in packs and then don't fear much until they learn respect the hard way. Everything here is either a hunter, a future, or a compromise. Leopleurodon does not do compromise. It hunts the border where light turns to rumour. The surface above looks like polished lead. From below it's a trembling mirror that projects silhouettes into the eyes of the patient. The animal rolls a few degrees, right eye up into the glare, left eye down into the green, the way professionals split their attention across planes. Those eyes aren't decoration, they're braced by sclerotic rings, bony donuts that keep big lenses precise, so the image doesn't wobble when power arrives. Watch long enough and you'll see the habit. A slow drift beneath the prey's shadow, a tiny shim from the rear flippers, a tightening of the spine. Acceleration isn't a countdown here. It's a decision. One hard, coordinated beat from all four wings, and the animal goes from background to physics in the spate of a startle. You don't hear it. You feel a wall of pressure arrive a fraction of a second before the rest, like a door slamming in a house you thought was empty. The mouth is already opening as it rises, because bites are best delivered to where the prey will be, not where the prey was when you started being interested. Teeth meet with the cheerful inevitability of a stapler. It does not slice, it takes ownership. Those conical teeth aren't knives, they're posts that refuse to bend, ideal for a grip you could build a plan around. The bite lands on bone-thick places, around the limb girdles, along the ribs, where leverage makes cruelty efficient. Then the head moves. Side-to-side wrench, short and mean. Sometimes a roll, torsional feeding long before crocodiles sold the move as a party trick, turning slabs into strips with a twist that radiates from skull to shoulder, like a bad idea finding its audience. Blood becomes a weather event. The water goes opaque around the struggle and you learn something about the density of silence. Controversy doesn't stop the kill, and it never paid for one either. Yes, the maximum length gets litigated at conferences and in comment sections by people who really should hydrate more. No, it doesn't matter to you. A 6 to 7 metre animal with a head that's a third of its body, a bite built to void warranties and 4 hydrofoils is not a downgrade. That's the punchline. Myth wanted a dragon. Reality gave you a guillotine with steering. You want behaviour? The rock obliges with bullet points written in calcium and regret. Puncture marks on contemporaries that match tooth spacing like signatures. Scrapes where enamel skated after the bone capitulated. Coprolites, polite word for fossil poop, sparkling with fish scales and belemnite hooks under the museum lights, each glitter a receipt for a meal that didn't finish negotiating. Stomach content whispers at least say fish, squid, reptile without naming names. The rest of the family album show the same menu with better penmanship. Sometimes it doesn't sprint, sometimes it manages. A storm shoulders us across the shelf and turns the surface into broken glass. Carcasses loosen from the silt and begin a slow ascent, buoyed by gases that don't care about dignity. Leopleurodon patrols the rack lines, sniffs at a drifted ichthyosaur that's more balloon than meat, tests with a gentle bite that would take your arm off, and lets go, bored when the yield disappoints. Scavenging isn't beneath apex, it's insurance. Why build speed from molecules when someone else assembled it yesterday? Breathing is a chore it dispatches with a professional's contempt for ceremony. A dome of black skin breaks the mirror, nostrils sip a lungful of weather, and the sea reseals like a secret. If you're scanning for dorsal fins because culture taught you to fear triangles, you'll certify this water safe. Your checklist is from the wrong century. You keep building plans you know you won't have time to execute. If you stay very still, will it lose interest? Number. A silhouette is a silhouette whether it twitches or prays. If you dive, will the deep protect you? Absolutely not. The line where warm slides over cool is the mall escalator of the Jurassic, and predators ride it like board security. If you sprint, lovely. The first tail beat of a panicked fish is a starting gun. The 4 wings behind you convert distance into comedy. You can be something with a chance. Let's make you a mid-sized ichthyosaur with too much confidence. You bank against your own reflection and chase a school that keeps reappearing one body length away because the current is playing jokes. The pressure behind you deepens into a shape your nerves mislabel as draft. The water to your left becomes structured. You roll to see why the world has a plan for you, and the plan is a mouth. Teeth enter your personal space with the formality of a signature. The first bite rearranges the ribs you were so fond of. The twist turns decisions into noise. Swap costumes, be the long-necked plesiosaur elegant like a ballet dancer practicing in a war zone. Your head darts for a fish, your neck follows like a thought that's pleased with itself. The hit doesn't target the head. It ignores the long-reaching antenna and collides with the trunk. The big skull grips. The short neck saves all the torque. Your own absurdly beautiful neck becomes leverage against your skeleton. The second bite lands higher, not kinder. Dignity fails the structural test. Other hunters hang back, taking notes they cannot read. Marine crocodiles, all sinuous tail and pointed snout, cruise the edges and perform reluctance when the big one rolls an eye. Sharks break the surface elsewhere, advertising chaos with splashes that feel like bravado now. Later, when the main course has been converted into strips and opinions, everyone gets to celebrate economy. Until then, the centre of the scene belongs to a method. It was born to salt, not sand. The hips are reduced, the pelvis a shrug at the idea of shore leave. Its broader clan carried young in the water, tail first, lungs last, which is how you debut when oxygen is a privilege you have to deserve. There is no nursery cove guarded by gossiping adults. There is only the shelf, the green, and a syllabus that starts with swim and ends with don't stop. Juveniles were just prototypes with hunger. Do you want to talk senses? Smell isn't a rumour. Channels in the skull hint at respectable plumbing. Taste is a slow, broad instrument, reading chemical gradients written by distance and time. Hearing? The head is a hammer. Subtle vibrations probably get lost in the architecture, but pressure is a language every square centimetre of skin can read. Vision is the star. Big lenses, reinforced frames, the kind of optics that punch through haze and glare to extract a silhouette from the world's worst diagram. In good light, the eyes measure distance like accountants. In bad light, they still do okay. You will not outstare this. Once in a while, the sea lets you see the thing in profile. If you're a gull with teeth, if you're very lucky and very airborne. From above, the counter-shaded back erases itself against depth. From the side, the pale underside is all understatement. The head breaks the surface just enough to insult the sky with breath, then settles. No plume, no theatrical exhale, no mercy for your curiosity. It's like being flashed a knife you barely recognise before it's gone. What about intelligence? Not the cleverness that solves puzzles with sticks, wrong theatre, but the wisdom of energy economics. It doesn't sprint if it can ambush. It doesn't chase if it can intercept. It doesn't fight for scraps when it can wait for a better return. The flippers draw their neat, optimised arcs. The jaw opens only as wide as it must. Every movement is an invoice. Every kill is a payment with interest. The ledger balances because failure is terminal. At some point someone will ask you, because people always do, yes, but how big? You'll say a number to be polite. Then you'll tell them the part that matters. The water in front of you lifted a fraction before the shape arrived. The light lost confidence for a heartbeat. A mouth that looked too large for its owner made the world behind it irrelevant. There weren't any drum rolls. There was no speech. There was just the clean, sharp grammar of a bite that has been practicing for 160 million years. And somewhere in the murk where facts and fear agree, the argument about meters went very, very quiet. The Jurassic Sea pretends to be simple, green, flat, full of polite little currents that mind their own business, right up until the water gets teeth. You're drifting over limestone country in progress, where gullies of darker brine thread through paler shelves, a patchwork of warmth and not warmth that herds fish like a grocery store aisle. The light up top is a hammered sheet. Below it, the world turns to gradients and guesses. Something is writing its name in those gradients, and the signature is shorter, deep, and blunt and in all the ways that matter. Think crocodile, then delete most of what you know. This one doesn't sun itself on a bank and collect armor like hobbies. It has shed the heavy plates to become sleek, skin smoothed into hydrodynamic velvet. Legs are gone in all but spirit, retooled into 4 paddles that sweep and feather instead of push and stumble. And the tail... oh, the tail has thoughts of its own, ending in a fin that turns a single sideways flick into a forward sentence. If modern crocodiles are amphibious thugs that moonlight as logs, this is a full-time professional in shark cosplay. Only the costume fits better than the original. You spot it first as wrongness, the way a corridor of water stiffens as though the sea is inhaled. Then the outline, revealed by motion rather than light. The torso is stout and deep. This thing is built like a mainspring, but the head is the punchline, a short, high snout. A skull that looks like it grew around jaw muscles the way a city grows around money. The mouth opens and you meet the reason we're here. Not the generic ice cream cone teeth of a fish stabber. These are laterally compressed with serrations, yes, serrations, running their edges like tiny saws. The Jurassic invented steak knives and then it installed them in something that swims. Most marine predators solve problems with puncture and shake. This one adds carve. When it takes you, it doesn't just hold, it edits. Those Ziphodont teeth bite down and, with a small furious tremor of the head, begin to saw. Flesh yields like a bad argument. Bone doesn't like it either. A conical tooth can slip, a serrated one insists. The first lesson written on the bones of the time is bite marks with scrapes that stop abruptly where the tooth ran out of victim. Paleontologists call the pattern diagnostic. The ocean calls it, oh, that guy again. It performs better where the water makes choices. The thermocline draws a slow, sinuous boundary through the column. Warm above, heavy below, and everything even halfway edible congregates there because compromise tastes like safety. Our short-skulled swimmer cruises that line like security at a concert, one eye up into glare, one down into green, reading silhouettes the way you read headlines you can't quite ignore. Its nostrils sit high, part of a bony palate trick that lets it breathe and bite without drowning in its own ambition. Somewhere behind the snout, glands evacuate salt so the bloodstream remembers it's not a lagoon. Up it goes for a subtle breath, a quiet dome of head, a sip of sky, gone. If you were counting dorsal fins, you missed it. It refuses to be a triangle. Prey here has resumes worth skimming. Shoals of fish with crescent tails scissor the water into ribbons. Belemnites, squid with hard opinions, jet in little staccato dashes. Juvenile ichthyosaurs come swaggering through like living torpedoes on provisional licenses. Long-necked plesiosaurs waft past, heads at the end of flexible statements, sampling the smaller chaos with tidy bites. And in the lanes where the water carries fewer stories and more facts, our hunter winds up like a spring being reasonable. It does not sprint every time. Sprints are expensive. It arranges, paddles angle, the tail writes one large claws through the water, and then there's that pressure front feeling, the sea hardening for a heartbeat. The approach is from the side and below, where the prey's eyes are worst and its options are paperwork. Impact is mouth. The teeth set like tools into a vice. The skull follows through. Not a wild thrash, calculated, high-frequency head shakes that turn whole into manageable, or a tight roll that uses physics as garnish. A cloud of microbubbles blooms around the act, froth and blood confetting the equation, and then the pieces become the plan. Crocodile, you repeat, clinging to language like a flotation device. Yes and no. The family resemblance remains in the architecture. The reinforced palate, the business-like hinge, the habit of turning prey into smaller, more portable definitions. But the rest is ocean solved. the skin's drag reducing hush in place of armour. Fore and aft limbs flattened into blades, each sweep a clean sheet torn off the water and filed behind. The tail fin is the exclamation point land crocs never needed. Evolution's patch notes for the sea read, remove plates, add speed, enable serrations, deploy. The nickname people throw around when they first meet the skull is Godzilla, and it's unfair to Godzilla. That was a rubber suit with city-sized dreams. This is a fossil turned fact. A head with vertical ambition, a jaw joint that laughs at talk, tooth crowns that can't decide whether they want to be knives or insults. The short snout isn't a mistake, it's leverage. Long, slender snouts are great for grabby fishing trips. This one is built for bigger problems, things with backbone and opinions. If the prey is armoured, the bite lands where the armour thinks it's safe. If the prey is quick, the attack begins where quick doesn't help. At the place, speed turns into structure. You can trace rivals by the teeth they leave in each other. Sharks are here, sure, carving cursive in open water and smelling opportunity like a retirement plan. Pliosaurs patrol the deeper lanes, all wing and guillotine. Motosaurs will come later and buy everyone new problems. But in this moment, in these shelves and gutters, the blunt-skulled slicer occupies a mean little niche where ambush meets butchery. Partitioning is the politest word for it. The big-winged reptiles handle the deep intercepts, the shark-shaped optimists run the sprints, the marine crocodile does rude, efficient things in the middle distance. There's room for all flavours of trouble when the sea is this busy. If you want to be method about it, look at bone histology. Growth rings that don't scream, famine, muscle scars that shout function, a skeleton that traded defensive hardware for propulsion and never looked back. Look at the skull's plumbing, the nasal passages remodelled to house salt glands big enough to keep the blood honest. Look at the tail bones, their tips anchored in a fin that turns lateral swishes into forward oaths. Even the eyes tell you a story you'd rather not read. Big enough to matter in dimness, braced by rings so pressure can't bully the lens out of honesty. Under a grey Jurassic noon, it still sees what it came to see. Diet guesses get less guessy when the rock keeps receipts. Coprolites, dark, polite, inconvenient truths, glitter under museum lights with fish scales and squid hooks. Bite traces on plesiosaur ribs match the spacing of those serrated teeth like a lock to its thief. No one piece of evidence waves a flag that says caught in the act, but the chorus is loud. Fast fish, chewy cephalopods, and anything reptilian that made the mistake of letting silhouette intersect with opportunity. Apex is less a title here and more a reliable habit. Now let's be generous and assume you're not a time-lost primate testing hypotheses with your legs. Be something that belongs, a hybridont shark, modest and proud of it. You snake along a thermocline, tasting the line where temperatures argue. The water to your right becomes structured, pressure above, something long and slower matching your speed without moving, as if the sea had grown a shadow. You twitch, the shadow doesn't. You roll to see whether the gradient grew teeth, and the gradient obliges. The head that meets you is shorter and higher than your brain allows. The mouth that receives you is full of serrations designed to make speed irrelevant. Your momentum carries you deeper into the bite. The first shake convinces your spine to let go of long-held beliefs. Swap bodies, be a juvenile plesiosaur with manners. You're practicing your civilized four-flipper rhythm, dabbing belemnites out of the water column with the confidence of someone who thinks elegance is a reasonable survival strategy. The water tilts beneath you, not current, intent. The predator doesn't go for the head-on theatre, it sidles up under your ribcage and turns the world sideways. Teeth set along your flank, the bite lands just aft of dignity, and the following saw-stop saw begins to convert noun into noun phrases. Strip, slab, piece, lesson. At the surface the sea shrugs. A bubble train finds the sun. A quick dome of skull violates the mirror for a breath that looks like nothing to be afraid of. Birds with too many teeth fold into the water and emerge with arguments. The chalk in the shallows fusses with a wavelet. If you were a human with a boat, you'd take pictures and caption them "tranquil morning." If you're anything else with a sense of context, you'd label it "intermission." There's a tendency to treat modern crocs as the blueprint and this creature as a variant. Flip it. Here's a branch that didn't wait at the riverbank for antelope. It took the template and refit every part that screamed shore. Skin became smooth, limbs became wings, the tail put on a fin that made water a partner instead of a chore. The jaw learned new tricks. Serrations arrived like a memo that said, "Puncture is fine, puncture and slice is better." It didn't forget where it came from, it just stopped sending postcards. What is it here? Less gossip than you'd think. The skull is thick, a hammer built to push forces around. Subtle vibrations get bullied. But water pressure is a language written on skin, and motion tells on itself. When you know how to listen. What does it smell? Enough, especially up top. The nostrils have no love for drama. They take their breath and any news about the neighbourhood's chemistry, and then they're done. Vision, though. Vision is queen. Even in this chalky world, silhouettes stand up and confess. You want a weakness because you're human and you negotiate with luck. Big predators pay high rent. They need returns. The ocean's compound interest. Miss too often and the machine starts spending itself, but missing often isn't what this animal plans for. It lives where targets crowd, where thermoclines herd, where dusk pulls edges off things so that edges can be reapplied by teeth. It aims for places where good decisions look like bad probabilities. Once, the sea pulls back its curtain for a theatre kid's 2 seconds. A storm has walked along the horizon for an hour, scolding. A carcass, something respectable, bloats upward from the silt, all gas and grievance bumping the underbelly of the thermocline. Our slicer rises beneath it like a courteous forklift, tests with a gentle set of teeth, and then chooses a seam where ligaments are optimistic. The head shakes once, small, mean, precise, and a panel of meat evacuates the problem. Sharks trace question marks around the scene and get their punctuation later. The part of you that asks for scale keeps nagging. How long? How heavy? Put it on a chart so sleep can file it. The numbers will be ranged and debated and footnoted. And then, in the instant the water around your calves changes personality, none of that will matter. What will matter is the shape of the head emerging from a shade you didn't know you were casting. The glint on a tooth that has a serrated edge, because the Jurassic could. The first short, efficient shake that turns you from alive into information broadcast to the food web. You'll admire the design, briefly and involuntarily. Then you'll join the minutes. The sea looks harmless until it edits itself. One moment it's all soft light and floating dust, the next, there's a corridor where there wasn't one. A narrow, darker lane that slides under you like a trapdoor. This is where the pretty rules break. The current goes quiet, the fish go angular, and the water acquires a personality you won't like. Something down there isn't a shark, isn't a plesiosaur, isn't anything you've trained your fear to recognize. It's a crocodile that quit land, shed the armor, and learned to sprint. It is sleek where crocs should be brick, knife-toothed where they should be cone-toothed, and it has the business-like calm of a professional who bills by the second. You don't see Decosaurus so much as you notice the mistakes that summon it. Start with the mouth, because that's how this story always insists on being told. Forget the long narrow out of a river ambush artist. This skull is short and tall, a bulldog silhouette hammered into hydrodynamics. The teeth don't taper to pegs. They're laterally compressed, honest to nightmare blades with fine serrations running their edges. Ziphodont, the polite term. Zippertooth, toothed. If you want to feel included in your own disassembly. Most marine reptiles of the time poked holes and held on, this one cut. Every tooth is a thesis about turning meat into smaller, more portable meat. Now zoom out. The armour is gone. No heavy bony scutes to turn speed into a rumour. The limbs are paddles, fore and aft, with the hand bones drawn long and stiff under a sheath of muscle, so the whole thing works like a wing that forgot how to flap and learn to carve. At the back, the tail lifts into a crescent fluke, the lower lobe bigger, the vertebral column bending into it like a keel. A living hypercircle scythe beating in clean, efficient strokes. Crocodile heritage still haunts the outline, but the sea has done new math on every surface. Even the skull roof hints at salt-handling plumbing, space for glands to bleed off the ocean you just drank with your dinner, because you don't get to be a marine predator for long if the soup cooks you from the inside. It lives where Europe will later learn to be complicated, broad shelf seas smeared over what will become England and Germany, and also far away in the future bones of Argentina, where the Noquin basin stores its secrets in layers that peel like pastry. 2 worlds, same mood. Green water, chalk breath, a buffet that moves. Birds with teeth come knifing down from a sky that can't decide what century to be. Ammonites spin their migraine spirals in the mid-water, flashing shell like a dare. Hybodont sharks patrol with the tired arrogance of things that used to be apex when the invitation list was shorter. Everything minds its own business until business changes shape. You are surface-deep optimism with ankles. Under you, the hunter paces the last light like a rumour that won't resolve. One eye angles up to the glare, the other watches the green. The head tilts and then, subtly, rudely, vanishes as the whole body aligns behind the skull. Acceleration isn't drama, it's a quiet decision. The tail fluke writes a single bracket into the water. Pressure pushes at your eardrums like a warning that would very much prefer to be late, and the lane below becomes a moving wall with opinions. Choose a victim. A plesiosaur, long-necked and busy, is threading its delicate head through a school of fish like it's sipping beads off a string. That neck is a love letter to reach and a liability to physics. Dacosaurus ignores the baited end. It lines up on the torso, where a shove becomes a spin. The bite lands behind the shoulder girdle, serration soaring through skin and the top layer of denial. You think rip, but it's neater than that. A clamp, a short, savage headshake, a twist that transfers from skull to spine to water. The neck that made the plesiosaur elegant becomes its own lever, torquing the body the wrong way, while the croc's tail engine holds the world steady. A second bite higher up, closer to the spine, closer to the part of you that negotiates with gravity, and suddenly flippers are writing beautiful, useless circles in place. The sea goes cloudy with protein. Sharks arrive from the margins pretending they were invited. If you're hunting with teeth like these, you don't always have to hit hard, you have to hit right. Conical teeth crush and hold, and serrated teeth requisition and partition. You can see the difference in the fossils. Bones with long furrows where a blade tracked through. Rib heads with half-moon bites scooped out. Striations that match the tooth edges like a signature signed in bad faith. When the skull doesn't want to roll, the neck doesn't either. The power jumps shoulders like a thrown chain, and the cut happens anyway. The body is a solution you can't argue with. Those reduced hips, that's a resignation letter to land. The torso is deep but not barrel stupid, muscle wrapped around a respiratory machine that doesn't want to waste a breath. The foreflippers do the heavy lifting, literal hydrodynamic lift as they scoop and feather, while the hind flippers fix, trim and pivot the animal into smarter lines. Watch it bank. The whole predator leans like a fighter that knows the weight of its own knives. You get a glimpse of counter-shading as it rolls, dark on top, pale beneath. A paint job that edits itself into whatever background you're least prepared to see. What about hearing? The skull is a club. Subtlety dies somewhere in the bone. Vision, though, big orbits, reinforced by sclerotic rings, has the confidence of optics that can plot distances in haze. Taste and smell move more slowly, gradients travelling through the lanes of warm and cool. You call that weird feeling. Every fluke beat throws information back at the nerves along the skin. Pressure changes, turbulence, the wake shadow of something up there trying not to be geometry. You can almost imagine it grinning, and that's not fair. Predators don't grin. Their faces just happen to be shaped like conclusions. Argentina writes a different chapter with the same pen. The water is darker, pocked by rain, and the basin makes a bowl for carcasses after storms. A dead ichthyosaur rolls at the surface like a bloated coin. The hunter rises underneath it, not because it likes its food aged like theatre props, but because calories are calories and storms are messy. The snout nudges, the body slides, the jaws open only when the softest line presents itself. A single decisive cut along ligaments that thought they were permanent. The carcass yields, and the slick of oils unfurls like a flag you suddenly understand. A second Dacosaurus circles in, not cooperative so much as convergent. They don't clash, they partition. Sharks sulk in frustrated commas at the edge of the paragraph and then dive in for punctuation when it's safe. If you're hoping to exploit a weakness, you can try to manufacture one. Go still. Dive. Climb. Do nothing. The silhouette problem remains. Stillness is only a strategy against predators that trigger on motion. This one triggers on outline and context. Dive to the thermocline, the line where warm stacks overcool, and you'll find the mall escalator of the Jurassic again, with hunters riding it for reviews. Climb to the surface and you enter the mirror zone, where the glare hides incoming decisions until they're your last. You were not designed for this conversation. You were designed to build tools and excuses. Neither floats. There's a myth that reptiles can't run hot enough for this lifestyle. That's a land problem. Big bodies hold heat like grudges. Call it mesothermy if you prefer a label. Muscles pull when the ledger says they can. The fluke stamps out its steady currency. Breath is stolen at the surface in small unadvertised sips, no operatic gasp, just a quiet insurance policy, and then the mirror heals. Reproduction. The pelvis is the hint and the paddles are the verdict. You don't come ashore on legs you traded in. You don't drag a belly full of eggs across a beach your lungs can't manage. Did it birth live like its dolphin-shaped contemporaries? The rock won't swear to it. The skeleton will wink and shrug and go back to swimming. However the babies arrived, they arrived into a place with no corners, no nursery except a moving target, and the same lesson plan as the adults. Swim correctly or stop being a noun. There's a day when you get to see the whole animal because the sea decides to be generous. You're up in the useless safety of air, watching the flat glare for anything that makes you feel better, when a dark line curves just beneath like the edge of a buried moon. The head breaks first, just the top of the skull, just the nostrils, and there's a quick exhale that looks like a mistake and an inhale that looks like theft. You notice the absence of armour. The clean plane of the back, the way the tail's lower lobe draws an underline beneath the body. Then it folds the moment shut and takes the light with it. You almost convince yourself you imagined it. You didn't. The fish didn't either. Behaviour isn't always violence. Sometimes it's patience that hurts your feelings. Decosaurus hovers in the lee of a chert ledge, where the current stalls and small life stacks up like traffic. It waits as the school tightens into its own defence, a glittering ball with terrible ideas. Then it doesn't charge through like a drunk at a parade. It grazes the margin, mouth half open, teeth parted, and lets the panicked fish feed themselves into the spaces between blades. Serrations do what serrations do. The predator turns, swallows with small efficient throat folds, and resets without breaking its line. No wasted kick, no flex, only arithmetic. You can draw it badly on a napkin and still be right. Triangular teeth with saw edges, jaw joint low and strong, snout short, eye big, body smooth, tail with a downturned blade, front paddles large, back ones tidy. Add a label that says marine croc and then cross out croc, because all the croc you're thinking of is wrong. The river ambush is gone, the belly dragging is gone, the basking, the waiting, the log pretending, all gone. What's left is a weaponized outline that swims like conviction and eats like a deadline. You're certain now that noise will save you. Surely mass murder makes a ruckus, but the ruckus is after, and it belongs to other species arriving late. During, it's the soft thud of a body becoming a plan, the tick of serrations writing their tidy critique, the stifled thrash that can't find purchase because water doesn't offer handholds. The ocean keeps its secrets the way it keeps everything else, by carrying them away in plain sight. The last thing you learn is cruel. A shark slices the surface 20 meters off, advertising chaos with a fin, because sharks enjoy marketing. You fixate on the triangle. You miss the shadow unspooling beneath you like a sentence with a hidden clause. The head lifts. The jaw opens a little wider than you practiced in your nightmares, and those tidy, mean, serrated teeth frame the only geography that matters. When it closes, it isn't anger, it's punctuation. The first thing you notice isn't the shark, it's the lane. The Western Interior Seaway is a patchwork of temperatures and densities sliding over each other like badly aligned glass. Fish love the edges between layers, so do things that edit fish. You're floating above one of those edges, congratulating yourself on the way the light looks like polished tin. Then the water forgets to be calm. A narrow pressure corridor hardens beneath you, a crease that moves with intention. You don't see the animal. You feel the argument it's about to win. Cartilage doesn't fossilize politely, so the rock keeps this predator as fragments. Vertebral coins stacked like chalk poker chips, rosettes of calcified rings that once flexed with power, and teeth, always teeth, scattered through the strata like a rain that never quit. The teeth are tall and clean-edged, triangular blades with cutting margins so smooth you could shave your optimism with them. No dainty serrations, just honed planes and a point that means it. In juveniles, tiny side cusps sometimes hang on like training wheels. In adults, the crown streamlines into a knife that wants to be busy. People call it the Ginsu shark. You'll think that's cute for exactly one heartbeat. Imagine a body built for yes. A torpedo torso with the tight waist and crescent tail of a long-distance sprinter. A keel at the caudal peduncle that turns the back end into a hinge. Pectoral fins broad enough to serve as wings, lending lift to a fish that refuses to wallow. The skin is a velvet lie. Micro teeth called denticles cover every inch, each one a microscopic blade set into the current at a helpful angle. Water sticks, then slides, then forgets you were there. Counter shading paints the top in shadow and the belly in weather, so from above you disappear into depth and from below you dissolve into glare. 5 gill slits work like bellows under the shoulder girdle. No wasted motion, no ornamental flares. Everything about it is a sentence without adjectives. The head looks like speed had a face. Black window eyes stare forward with the cold accounting of an animal that lives on timing. Behind the eyes, electroreceptors and palette of Lorenzini read the faint electrical burps of muscles in the murk. Water vibrating at frequencies you call nothing registers as supper. Inside the skull, olfactory chambers double as a tracking array. Blood is a chemical rumour that moves down current. This predator reads rumours the way lawyers read loopholes. The mouth is long and the jaw hinges deep, the bite a fast, flat guillotine meant to open a future and step through it. It is everywhere that matters. North America's chalk seas, Europe's warm shelves, the ghosted edges of the Tethys. Mid-late Cretaceous, when continents had not yet invented their final shapes and the air smelled faintly of plants you won't meet for another 60 million years. Above, pterosaurs with wings like draped sailcloth patrolling wind streets, sometimes falling out of the sky on purpose. Around you, Xiphactinus, the saber-smiled murderer fish, slicing the column like a thrown knife. Enchodus flashing fangs you wouldn't put your fingers near. Turtles the size of furniture. Plesiosaurs sewing lazy figure eights at the thermocline. Mosasaurs writing punctuation marks beneath the glare. You just swam into a sentence with too many apexes. Congratulations. The shark chooses the corridor and holds it. Nose angling fractionally, tail ticking like a metronome set to inevitable. It paces the boundary where warm rides cool. That boundary funnels prey. It also funnels ignorance. The school of mackerel-bodied fish below tightens into a glittering ball the way prey does when it wants to be brave together. The shark slides along the margin, mouth slightly open, teeth parted like a smile that isn't for you. It doesn't charge through like a hero in a painting. It grazes the edge and lets the panicked fish feed themselves into a geometry problem. Each bite is a swipe, not a crush. Open, close, reset. Paper-thin slabs of light disappearing down a throat that never loses count. A larger shadow catches his attention. Xiphactinus. All speed and bad decisions, flanked by pilot fish and haunted by its own legend. The shark doesn't sprint yet. It reads the water for angles, the swell of the school, the flare of the fish's pectoral fins telegraphing a turn, the wake shadows painting moving stripes across nothing. Then a single hard kick turns stored possibility into acceleration. If you're close enough to hear anything, it's the silence of your own heart pausing to reassess. The hit lands just behind the head, where muscle bulks around the spine. The mouth doesn't close like a trap. It scythes. Smooth-edged blades take a page out of a living book. The fish jolts. The shark slashes again and again, taking function out of muscle until the rest of the story is logistics. Blood describes circles in the water. The shark writes tidy lines through it. You imagine this as a soloist. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the sea writes a different scene. A turtle rolls at the surface to breathe. Something beneath decides that was generous. The shark rises under it and doesn't ram like a mosasaur would. It trims pieces out of the margins that matter. The flexing tissue near the shoulder, the hinge of the flipper, the seam where shell meets soft. It's surgical vandalism. The turtle becomes a compromise machine, still alive, already over. The shark arranges the future to its liking and only then invests in a full claim. You want to know whether it fought mosasaurs. The rock says, occasionally and not always on purpose. Bite marks on reptile bones with smooth cutting edges the right size and attitude. Gouges across ribs and limb girdles that drew tidy arcs. Sometimes the shark is the author. Sometimes it's a scavenger taking a dividend from someone else's catastrophe. Apex is not a title, it's a schedule, when a motosaur is distracted by a struggling plesiosaur. The shark moves in for a share, a clean strip, a practice retreat. When the mosasaur notices, calculus happens. Teeth exchange opinions. Scales and denticles file reports. The meeting adjourns with both parties in possession of new scars and the shark already elsewhere. Teeth don't last long here, not in mouths. They're a conveyor belt. New crowns forming inside the jaw, rolling forward to replace the ones blunted by reality. A single animal can shed tens of thousands over a lifetime. The seaway keeps them all, peppering the chalk with triangles like warning signs nobody read in time. Paleontologists dig them out and line them up in glass cases, each tooth a tiny poster for consequence. Some teeth are small, thin, juvenile work. Some are broad and tall, 7 centimeters of no, really. The curve of the cutting edge tells you which part of the jaw it served. The root tells you how soon it was planning to leave. Inside those vertebral coins, growth rings record youth and time like tree trunks. A fast climb to adult power, then a steadier accrual, a biography of a fish that didn't bother with awkward phases. Big-bodied lamniforms get help from physics. Heat generated by muscle stays longer simply because mass refuses to give it up. Add a metabolism on the lively side, maybe even regional warm spots like modern makos and great whites, and you get a predator that writes endurance into its daybook. Long patrols, sudden sprints, a recovery that doesn't punish ambition. The Cretaceous ran warm. This animal ran warmer. Storm day. The surface becomes shattered tin. Wind stacks lines of foam into rows like messy handwriting. Under that cryptic scribble, carcasses rise. Gas-bloated fish, an unlucky reptile, a turtle that lost a bet. The shark cruises the slicks diagonally, not because it likes being contrary, but because scent flows diagonally in turbulence and information is oxygen you eat. It tests with quick, pragmatic bites. One taste tells you age, species, the address of the wound, and whether it's worth arguing over. If it is, the shark circles down current and sets up in the blind spot, then arrives again at a speed that converts interest into new facts. If it isn't, it slips away as if gravity had turned sideways. It surfaces without theatre. A dorsal triangle might cut the skin of the sea and then vanish in the same breath. More punctuation than warning. A back arches, smooth as an insult. No breach, no spray, no speech. Breath in, breath out, gone. You raised on movies keep waiting for the musical cue. The ocean declines to participate. The only soundtrack is the hint of your own bubbles and the quiet thump of a heart whose owner knows suddenly that their place in the food web is downwind. Make yourself useful. Be a respectable fish, not a time traveller with knees. You're 1.5 meters of confidence, nailing the thermocline like you paid rent for it. You turn with your school because turning together feels like safety. The water to your left turns thick. The shark folds into your periphery like a line you didn't notice in the contract. Mouth opens, not wide, just right. You feel pressure, not pain. Your nerves are fast, but not as fast as physics. You hitch. The school surges away in a beautiful mistake. The shark doesn't chase the crowd. It follows your specific failure and completes it. All of this is violence. None of it is sloppy. Smooth-edged teeth don't chew. They edit. Jaw muscles don't flex for show. They close with the efficient finality of a door that never squeaks. The tail doesn't wag happiness. It carves thrust in measured drafts. You keep searching for malice because malice would make this feel personal. It isn't. It's a budget. Energy in, energy out. Interest collected in calories. The sea pays what you take from it in coin, not in revenge. The myths you bring with you, the idea that sharks always circle, that they taste then leave, that they announce themselves with a fin as tall as your fear, come from a different century and mostly a different species. This one can circle when that's smart. It can also arrive like a sentence fragment and depart like an alibi. If you insist on seeing the fin first, fine. It shows you the fin, it just shows it to you after. A gull with teeth dives and hauls a wriggling silver length out of the mirror, beating upward in a flurry of indignant wings. The shark's head rises under that triumph like an edit. Water hills, the mouth opens, the bird loses both fish and argument. The head barely breaks, the shark barely cares who's watching. A second later, the surface remembers how to be a surface. There are days when the sea lets you witness an audit. Far below, a mosasaur has pinned a plesiosaur and is doing accounting with its skull. The water around them is dark with paperwork. The shark holds at the edge of the bloom, making slow, apparently lazy circles. Mosasaurs need air. Sharks do not. The first time the reptile bolts for the surface, the shark does nothing. The second time, when blood loss has scribbled clumsiness into every movement, it accelerates once and takes a strip from the hip on the way by. Not a challenge, a fee. Even the waist has edges. Coprolites, fossilized droppings press into chalk with glitter inside. Scales from fish that shone like coins in bad light. Belemnite hooks that once pinned squid muscle to itself. Tiny bone fragments from animals that collected bad luck like hobbies. Under museum lights, those glittering specks look festive. They are receipts. You keep building a plan. Maybe if you hang just below the surface, you can watch for shadows. Maybe if you dive, the dark will be your ally. The shark has already auditioned and cancelled your plan millions of times. Under the mirror, silhouettes simplify. A white belly erases into sky. An open mouth is the only geometry that matters. Below the thermocline, the water cools and hushes, and the shark's senses get louder. Staying still doesn't make you invisible. It makes you a fixed point in a system designed to notice fixed points. What you wanted, secretly, was for this to be a monster, something with horns and temper. What you get is a function with teeth. It grew fast because the world rewarded fast. It spread across oceans because oceans are contiguous if you're patient and hungry. It lasted because it made good trades. Effort for outcome, risk for return. Its extinction will be a story about changing seas and shifting caste lists, but on the day you met it, none of that matters. On the day you met it, the lane hardened under you, the pressure changed, and a clean edge moved through water like a decision. The shark passes beneath again, just a shadow whose shape refuses to resolve. You notice the tail more this time, the stiff narrow base, the long crescent blade at its end, ticking away the distance between what you are and what the sea does with you. You notice the pectorals. Not flapping, but trimming the animal into lines a yacht designer dreams about and never achieves. You notice the mouth, and then you stop noticing because it's working. There is no chorus, no drum roll. The cut is the sound. The water accepts the news, and somewhere above, gulls with teeth keep stitching the sky, while below, the ledger balances with a blade. The western interior seaway looks polite until you notice how much sky it owns. It stretches like a hallway someone forgot to put doors in, layered with warm and cool lanes sliding past one another, each one an invitation written in invisible ink. A pterosaur stitches a line across the glare and is gone. A school of fish shivers into a single mind and then unravels again, unable to agree on what the future should be. You float at the surface, legs dangling, a soft experimental idea in a world with very strong opinions. Something below you draws a neat vertical line through the water. The corridor hardens. You feel it in your ribs. You don't see the animal. That's the point. It is not a reptile, not a shark, not a myth. It's a fish that never learnt restraint. A deep-bodied missile with scythe fins and a grin full of unserrated knives, laterally compressed like it was hammered flat for speed. The chest is tall and thin, the tail a crescent that writes exclamation points into the sea with each beat. Pectoral fins flare like the blades of a fan, giving the body lift so it flies through water instead of simply pushing at it. The head is long, the jaws longer, and the teeth, dear optimism, the tall conical spikes planted in sockets like promises. There's no delicate cutting edge, no fussy sawtooth, just clean, impolite points meant to take hold and not let go. You can fit your fingers between them. You shouldn't. Call it Xiphactinus, knife fish. Late Cretaceous overachiever, common as gossip in the chalk beds of Kansas, and perfectly at home in Europe and other corners of the Tethys, when maps were more creative. 4 to 5 meters of open water entitlement, with a half meter of we're starting with the face. It's Nyctheodectid, cousin in spirit to modern tarpons and ladyfish, but bigger, meaner and blissfully uninterested in your taxonomic qualms. The skeleton tells you all you need. Vertebrae stacked like coins, fin rays long and stiff, a skull built light for speed but braced in the right places to make terrible ideas come true. The eye is big because the ocean lies. Glare turns the surface into a mirror. Silt turns the midwater into soup. Dusk smears detail into rumour. Xiphactinus plots through it with a lateral line that reads, pressure ripples like a fingerprint and olfactory chambers that turn scent into a map. Blood is a banner that travels. It follows the banner without ever pretending to be noble. You're a silhouette at the interface where warm slides over cool. The fish takes that personally. Motion betrays you. The school below you tightens into a shimmering ball when danger pinches it. Xiphactinus doesn't charge straight through like a hero. It sideswipes with its mouth ajar, teeth parted, turning itself into a moving gate. Fish pour through the wrong door and learn what head first means in a sentence that ends with swallowed. The jaw opens wider than you expect, the throat folds to make space, and a single violent convulsion drags dinner into the past. You could call it gulp feeding if you wanted to be polite about theft. It hunts big because big is efficient. Small bites are for amateurs and starvation. There is a fossil, famous because the truth occasionally writes punchlines, of a Xiphactinus with its last bad decision still inside it. An entire fish nearly 2 meters long curled like a parenthesis in the predator's belly. You can walk past the skeleton under museum lights and see the outline of Lunch, trapped inside Lunch Eater, 2 fish framed by the same ribs, the predator's sternum cracked where swallowing ambition exceeded engineering. Did it choke? Did the load tear something important? The specimen doesn't say regret, but the outline does. You don't need the label. You can feel the hubris from behind the glass. On a good day, though, the system works. Find the thermocline, that silky invisible escalator where warm, light water rides a colder, denser slab. Plankton congregates there because physics is lazy. Small fish show up because plankton is slow. Bigger fish arrive because small fish never learn. Xiphactinus paces the line like a patient argument. It sits slightly below the prey's shadow, where silhouettes sharpen into targets, and lets the current push the future toward its face. One tail beat, and the world slants. The mouth opens on the way in, the teeth pin the moment. The tongue, muscular and rude, shoves and arranges. The gullet receives. The body flexes like a bow. The bow releases. If you were within hearing range, you'd hear nothing but your own breath being demoted. You want to believe in fairness. You look for a dorsal fin slicing the surface like punctuation. It has one, sure, tall, triangular, a flag that flashes and vanishes in the same heartbeat. But it isn't a warning, it's a footnote. The breath is low drama, a quick roll, a sip of air stolen at the seam between glare and depth, and then the mirror sews itself shut. No breach, no sermon. Just a function, returning values. When it misses, it doesn't sulk. It turns, recalculates, and cleaves the water along a new line. The tail base is stiff, reinforced with keels that let the crescent blade at the end do honest work. The body behind the head is spring steel with opinions. The head stops flopping the instant it commits. You'll get a clean shot of the counter shading if you're unlucky enough to be above it when it rolls. Dark back erasing into the void, pale belly giving the surface back to itself. You're not the first to miss it. You won't get to be the last. Its competition is a crowded committee with a short attention span. Mosasaurs patrol lower and meaner, writing ambushes into the thermocline with tails that move too much water for your nerves. Sharks, lamniform sleek with cutlery teeth, work the same lanes with a different doctrine / MAME invoice. Xiphactinus has the confidence of a specialist that refuses to be a niche. It does not need serrations to run a budget. It does not need armour to pretend it isn't a fish. It is happy to carve strips, happier to take whole meals, and happiest when your outline says some assembly required. Imagine being something that belongs here, a respectable turtle with furniture-scale ambitions, paddling up for a breath like the world owes you something. You break the surface, inhale the sky, and begin to fold down again when a dark wafer of geometry rises under your sternum, doesn't ram like a reptile, slices, then takes. Not the shell, too much admin. The soft seam where hard meets easy, the hinge, the shoulder. You leave a loop of oil behind and Xiphactinus is already past you, the tail ticking like a metronome that hates you personally. Or be a diving bird, Hesperornis, legs at the back, wings demoted to decoration, knifing after fish with your beak set for skewering. You lance a silver ribbon and begin your hard climb, beating water with your whole body like a misplaces a torpedo, when the water ahead of you wrinkles. The fish isn't where you think, it's further inside a mouth that wasn't there and then was. You pinwheel in bubbles, the predator tilts to keep you head first and tidy. The throat takes you down, your species evolves cleverer feet. It won't help much. The teeth tell stories even when the rest of the animal is dust. Some fossils carry their memories in their faces, glassy enamel on blades worn at the tips from living hard. Broken points resorbed and replaced by new ones rolling forward on the conveyor belt jaws love to hide. Teeth fall out every day, shed into the chalk like confetti at a victory parade, because biting the world has overhead. Paleontologists line those triangles in drawers and smell the ghost of the Cretaceous in powdered limestone. Every triangle is a date stamp. Every drawer is a calendar of decisions. Your brain wants social scenes, packs, schools, coordinated hunts with hand signals you can narrate. It might do lazy group work at carcasses because the ocean is large and coincidence is cheap. Storm-lifted bodies bobbing at the surface like rotten boys, sharks carving dividends from the margins, a mosasaur surfacing with something big and unhappy writhing in its mouth. Xiphactinus arrives as an accountant. It takes the kind of share that keeps a body plan solvent, a flank, a strip from the jaw hinge, a wedge from the base of the tail. It does not audition for alpha. It does not negotiate. When the reptile lunges, the fish is already 2 corridors away, drawing a new straight line no one can afford to interrupt. It is not indestructible. The museum's fish within fish says so with the clarity of a diagram. Hubris has mechanics. Swallow a prey item too large, and the belly stretches to the edge of its contract. A frantic twist tears something that needed to remain attached. The loaded animal can't right itself. The tail keeps beating while the plan dissolves. There are regurgitolites, fossil vomit, where a predator tried to reverse a decision and failed neatly enough to become a curiosity in a glass case. This should comfort you. It doesn't, because you're not a 2-meter tarpon-shaped fish with perfect streamlining. You're a problem the ocean can solve without effort. You keep looking for an audio track. There isn't one. A cut doesn't make noise. The closest thing to music is the erasure of small fish as they turn into a shimmer, then a spray of scales, then less than a rumour. If you lean in close enough to violate common sense, you might hear the click of jaw joint on jaw as the mouth snaps shut around certainty. Mostly you'll feel a pressure wave that does arithmetic on your ribs. Then you'll feel nothing useful at all. Stormlight changes the rules and does not protect you. Wind rows the surface into long white sentences that run together until meaning leaves. Rain hammers punctuation your body tries to read. The underlayers heave and trade places. Xiphactinus doesn't panic. It tacks like a sailor who built the boat, slipping diagonally across the wind streets, sampling scents where turbulence concentrates them, adjusting depth to keep silhouettes crisp and lies transparent. The pectorals flex to hold altitude. The tail spends only what it must. It shows up where the drift of dead things stacks in corners the map doesn't admit. It eats there too. The physics of your body make you bad at this. You're buoyant in the wrong places, heavy in the wrong way, made of optimism and air. You try to present as uninteresting, slow movements, no splashing, the posture of a log that decided to dream. You're still a contradiction at a thermocline, a shape that drinks light wrong, a wake shadow that gives you away to nerves you can't see. The fish below you flexes once and you're already less real to yourself. Everything about it is pared down to function. The vertebral column stiffens toward the tail so the final third of the body can be a whip. The anterior body is flexible enough to wring more thrust from the same stroke. The jaw muscles tie deep into the back of the head to turn speed into ownership at the instant of contact. Scales do not glitter prettily up close. They feel like fine sandpaper, microblades set to peel turbulence off in organized sheets. Even the gill arches are infrastructure. Filaments efficient enough to strip oxygen from the soup you're panicking in without a single wasted ripple. You, who have to psych yourself up to put your face in a cold sink, are meeting an animal that never thinks about water because water is the only thought it keeps. It doesn't hate you. It is incapable of the insult that would make you feel better. It simply writes itself across the sea in sentences you can't read fast enough. The surface blinks, a quick roll, a breath, then heals. The line below moves again, convinced as ever that everything above it is a scheduling problem it was built to fix. There's a moment, if you're flying along above in some comfortable modern fantasy, where you might see the whole animal. From the air, the shape is a leaf made of muscle, broad at the chest, tapering to a blade at the tail. A dark stripe of back buried in glare. The mouth opens and the face becomes older than language. The head cuts a narrow, pale wake, then it folds shut, and the wake becomes your last correct thought. In the chalk, the record keeps on without you. Coprolites glitter with scales like crushed stars, each piece a bead of someone else's speed. Gastric residues smear in lenses of darker stone where last meals became first drafts of geology. Tooth batteries scatter across layers like a calendar of hunger. In drawer after drawer, the triangles wait with their clean edges and their absence of apology. The labels are tidy, the story isn't. The fish was here. It still is, in the way an efficient idea refuses to leave after you understand it. You test one last plan. Drop, sink, hide. Below the thermocline, the cold holds you like a thought you didn't mean to have. The light goes from olive to graphite. Your heartbeat becomes percussion and your breath a small disloyal engine. The corridor forms again to your right this time, as something big edges the layer with the familiarity of a landlord. The pressure on your skin says line. The line says mouth. The mouth says nothing at all. The water over the Jurassic shelf wears the sky like a bruise. It isn't dark enough to be night and not honest enough to be day, just a long, moody dim that makes your pupils work overtime. Silt drifts down in a slow, chalky snow. Belemnites hang like loaded darts. Ammonites spin their pretty spirals and try not to look delicious. You're at the surface pretending you're invisible. Below, something is measuring you in lumens. It's a torpedo with a crescent tail and opinions about speed. But the first thing that matters is the apples. They are not eyes so much as architectural statements. Great round orbs braced by bony rings like Saturn forgot how to be subtle. Biggest eyes of any vertebrate we've found. Plates the size of dinner, built to keep the lens from deforming when the world gets deep and rude. In this light, those eyes are not windows to a soul, they're hardware, and the software says, if it glows, if it moves, if it interrupts the smooth lie of the water, it belongs in the mouth. Call it Temnodontosaurus, early Jurassic specialist and patron saint of seeing in places that don't want to be seen. The body plan is unapologetically modern. Tuna-like torso, stiff, narrow tail base with a lunate fluke. A dorsal fin that keeps the whole missile from rolling like a drunk idea. The skin is shaved down to physics, minute scales laid to sheer turbulence the way a razor lifts and cuts hair. Forefins and hindfins aren't flappy decorations, there are control surfaces, trimming pitch and yaw, so the first tail beat turns intent into geography. It breathes air, because your favourite nightmares always do, but surfacing is not an event. It's a punctuation mark. A low dome of skull breaks the mirror, nostrils sip a lungful of weather, and the sea stitches shut. If you were watching for a warning, that was it. Blink and the breath is history. Those eyes don't just make light look brighter, they make darkness slower. Big lenses, big pupils, and that steroidal sclerotic ring keep the optics honest when pressure says, please compress. You can write 2 sentences about what that means for you. It can see you earlier and it can see you deeper. Down past the thermocline, where warm slides over cold like mismatched panes of glass. Fast things queue up along the boundary. Temnodontosaurus lives on that line like it holds the lease. You want to believe it drifts around bumping into snacks. It doesn't. It scouts. The lateral line along its flank reads, pressure changes like braille. The nostrils taste the chemical gossip of cuttlefish ink and crushed fish skin. A rumour mill written in parts per billion. The eyes do the heavy lifting. Silhouettes sharpen out of haze. Bioluminescent plankton smear into contrails when something tries to sprint. The predator rolls a few degrees to put one pupil in the glare from above and the other in the green below. You call it paranoid, it calls it Tuesday. Acceleration is the part you don't get to process in real time. The tail writes a tight, efficient scythe through the water. The body ahead of it flexes in short, tuned arcs. And the animal goes from outline to where in the spit between your last thought and your last better thought. The mouth opens along the way because the bite is a rendezvous, not an afterthought. Teeth, stooped conical, designed for ownership rather than artistry, meet where the prey will be, not where it was. If the target is a fish, it goes in head first to keep fins from turning into anchors. If it's a squid, good luck to the squid. Hooks and ink do not debate with a skull like this. And yes, squid are on the menu. So are fast fish with too much confidence. So occasionally are other reptiles with poor life choices. You can read the receipts in the rock. Stomach residues glittering with belemnite hooks. Coprolite salted with fish scales. Bones scored by tooth marks with spacing you could lay a caliper across and draw a neat line back to a jaw with ambition. It isn't picky, it's efficient. Imagine you belong. You're a respectable hybridous shark writing cursive across the thermocline, smug on cartilage and momentum. The water to your right thickens, not murk, not current, just structure. You pivot and present a profile that says, I am not a target, I am a legacy. The ichthyosaur appears where you plan to be, not where you were. There's a flash of white belly and then the mouth is simply around the problem. Teeth pinch, jaws close, the head gives a short, mean twist that turns sprint muscle into supper. The shark leaves a slick of opinions. The predator leaves, or be a long-necked little plesiosaur on an errand you won't complete. Your head darts, your neck writes elegant question marks. You lance a fish and begin to be pleased with yourself. The ocean buckles under your sternum. Temnodontosaurus didn't chase the head. It targeted the centre of mass. A grip, a wrench, a roll. The old torsional trick predators like to pretend they invented. And now your beautiful neck is leverage against your lungs. The ichthyosaur doesn't do drama. It does logistics. You are now a logistics problem. You keep waiting for sound effects. There aren't any. Water swallows the violence the way it swallows everything. A pressure thump, a short ugly vibration travelling through bone, then turbulence and clouded water and the colour you're made of. The sea is loud with shrimp and sand and gossip. Nothing here pauses to applaud. At the surface, birds that aren't birds yet stitch their jagged flight across the glare. One folds and dives, legs splayed behind it like punctuation, and knifes a fish out of the mirror. The ichthyosaur's head arrives underneath like a correction. The bird loses the fish and the argument in the same motion. A breath happens, quiet as theft, and the situation heals itself. You could try to outsmart it with depth. You shouldn't. Those eyes aren't bragging, they're tools sharpened for twilight zones you haven't earned the right to pronounce. Pressure will tell you to exhale, cold will make your blood remember what it owes the rest of you. Your ears will gossip to your balance about how poor your choices are. Temnodontosaurus looks comfortable because physics put it in charge here. The bony ring around each eye holds shape the way a scaffold holds a tower. Pupils widen, the last light congeals into a useful lie, and there you are, a silhouette messing up the ocean's geometry. It wasn't born on a beach. Its clan gave birth live, tail first, lungs last, because the midwife here is called drowning. There's no gentle nursery lagoon. There's a syllabus: breathe now, swim now, see now. Tiny torpedo with big eyes arrives into an economy that doesn't do allowances. The adults do not babysit. The ocean does not grade on a curve. Sometimes you get to read a biography in scar tissue. Healed pits pock a skull where something with teeth once made a case and lost. Nicks on a fluke blade from a bad encounter with another missile or the ancient ancestor of wire. Pathologies that tell quiet jokes about the time prey kicked back and missed its chance. None of it slowed the animal down long enough to make a fossil out of mercy. You want to give it warm blood because that makes it sound like a peer. Doesn't care what you call it. Big bodies keep heat whether they mean to or not. High-performance muscle leaks warmth into the core and refuses to share. Call it mesothermy if jargon helps you sleep. The result is the same. Sprint capability that doesn't require a nap, and a brain that keeps its optics online when the water is colder than your excuses. On storm days, the sea writes in italics. Wind carves rows across the surface. Rain stipples the mirror into static. Carcasses rise, ugly and full of gas. Temnodontosaurus cruises the windrows diagonally, because scent and sense cross-hatch in turbulence. And nothing about this animal is accidental. It tests a floating ammonite shell with a patient push of the snout. Number. It tastes a chunk of something that used to be quick. Yes, the head tilts. The jaw opens just a little wider than your comfort zone and the piece disappears. If a shark is already there adding bullet points to the margins, the ichthyosaur doesn't grandstand. It takes a fee and leaves the meeting early. You keep inventing survival strategies you won't get to use. If I stay still, it might ignore me. You are a silhouette. Still silhouettes are easier to solve. If I thrash, maybe I'll scare it. You're not scary, you're telemetry. If I make for the surface, the last meter under the mirror is where the glare hides the mouth that makes your plan into a footnote. From above, if by some miracle you exist above in safety, you'd see an aesthetic that yacht designers spend careers failing to reverse engineer. Dark back erasing into depth, pale belly erasing into sky, a clean knife-thin wake that doesn't curl up into wasteful drama. Sometimes the animal porpoises, a low arc, a single breath, the brief flash of a fluke's upper edge, like the underline of a sentence you didn't read fast enough. Then nothing. The ocean is very good at pretending it's empty. There's a museum somewhere with a wall of eye rings, fossil hoops laid out like alien bracelets. One is enormous, thick as a child's wrist, plates overlapping to make a rigid circle. In life, that circle sat inside a socket like a shield, keeping the lens from turning into jelly under pressure. You can stand there under the lights doing the math with your own eye, your own thumb, your own fragile sense of scale, and realise that while you were learning the names of colours, something else was learning to see inside them. Picture yourself now as a fish with confidence you didn't earn, holding the thermocline because that's where your prey holds their mistakes. The water to your left goes structured again. The lane forms. The ichthyosaur's head is just a pale grin in the gloom. Not malevolent, not kind, just working. The pupils yawn wide. The tail writes its short, strict sentence. Your world contracts to a cone of water that ends in a decision you will not be asked to participate in. You want monsters, you get a function. Bones turned into levers, levers into motion, motion into meals, eyes into time machines that pull the future into focus early enough to profit from it. No triumph, no tragedy, just resolution. The sea was built to carry such things, and down in the dim where light is a rumour and depth is a policy, the big eyes blink once, as if to confirm the calculation you have been starring in, and the mouth closes like a door that has never squeaked. The ocean is still recovering from the worst hangover in Earth's history. A few million years ago, the Permian ended by turning almost everything into a rumour. Reefs collapsed into bacterial scum, fish lists got shorter than courtesy allows, and the waves rolled over a cemetery that never stopped. Now the Triassic has pulled the chairs back into the room, opened the windows and said, "We're fine. It is not fine. It is rebuilding at speed." And in that frantic restart, something shows up that looks at the new food web, reads it like a menu, and underlines everything. It is shaped like a promise and armed like an argument. It doesn't just eat fish. It eats the things that eat fish. You can call it by its formal name later. For now, it's the moment the sea remembers how to be cruel with efficiency. The water is clearer than it has any right to be. Carbonate bright, sun going down into it in fat spears, the shelf stepping out into deeper blue where your optimism goes to think. You're at the surface because apes love horizons. Beneath you, the light fades into plains. Warm pain on cool pain, a thermocline slicing the column into floors of different mistakes. Small coiled ammonoids bob like drifted punctuation. Belemnites hang like loaded quills ready to become ink. The new reef builders are busy trying to look respectable. Something passes under the glare line, and the water forgets how to be water for a second. Pressure changes. Your heartbeat files a complaint. The outline resolves the way a verdict does, first as a feeling, then as geometry, a long heavy head with a mechanical smile, a torpedo torso that doesn't wag, it wields. The tailstock bends downward into a strong, stiff blade and ends in a vertical fin more half-moon than sickle, a design in mid-evolution from lizard that swims toward a missile that breathes. Dorsal fin low and practical, pectorals broad and steering, hind fins trimming the argument, skin smoothed into physics, small scales or a tight hydrodynamic sheath that lets the water grip for an instant and then forget you existed. The eyes are large and braced by bony rings, hardware to keep lenses honest when the depth presses its case. The mouth opens as if the sea asked it a question it already knows the answer to, and you see what makes this animal different. The teeth are not cones for holding, they are laterally flattened, blade-edged stakes for taking, not dainty saws, honest cutting edges, meat editors. This is early, too early you might protest, for a hunter that can dismantle other marine reptiles like they are problems that got uppity. The ocean ignores your sense of pacing. In less than 10 million years after nearly everything died, the food web has already stacked itself tall enough to cast shade. And here's the executive level. An ichthyosaur built not just to ambush, not just to sprint, but to dominate. Think 8+ meters of apex before apex got its swagger back. Think skull like a battering ram that went to finishing school. Think jaws that close with the kind of leverage you measure in regrets. It needs air, because your nightmares are mammalian in their hobbies, but surfacing is a private act. A low dome breaks the mirror, nostrils steal a breath, and the seam heals without a fuss. No breach theatre, no sermon. Then back to the border where the last photons die. where silhouettes sharpen into targets and the thermocline herds everything with a pulse into lanes that end in statistics. Down there, the animal takes inventory as a nothosaur herons its long neck through the mid-water, mouth agape for fish it thinks are promises. Placodonts trundle near the bottom like armoured ideas that never learn to hurry. Slender, eel-backed ichthyosaurs scribble speed across the slope, all tail and optimism. Juveniles of bigger forms stick to the safer side of bravery. Everything is either a building, reproducing, or rehearsing. The hunter below is ready for opening night. Acceleration is not foreshadowed. One coordinated beat from that downturned tailstock, short savage power focused into the fin, throws the body forward. The forefins tilt and hold the line. The hindfins trim so nothing wobbles. It doesn't telegraph, it arrives. The mouth is already opening because the bite is a rendezvous with the future position of the prey, not a reaction to the past. Blade-edged teeth meet where a trunk is thick and attached to important things. A nothosaur pinwheels as if the ocean just yanked its spine sideways. A young marine reptile, an ichthyosaur half the predator's length, becomes a case study in how much force ligaments can absorb before they write a resignation letter. There's a short, ugly twist, the old torsional trick that turns slabs into strips, and the green goes cloudy with proteins that used to be organised. This animal can swallow big. It prefers to. Headfirst is policy. Fins and flippers lie flat that way and don't argue. The throat flexes in a practiced muscular wave. You might think that's rash. Ask the fossil in the museum with the 2-meter fish inside its predator for a cautionary tale. But that's a later ocean's hubris. Here, the game is large prey economics, fewer chases, bigger returns. Macropredatory is the tidy, unscary word scientists like to write in papers when what they mean is it eats things almost its own size and looks good doing it. Teeth tell the rest of the truth. They stand deep in the jaw in neat files, each crown bladed along the edges so the bite doesn't just pin, it parts. No ornamental serrations, no fussy fluting, just clean-cutting margins that turn resistance into compliance. You can read their spacing on the fossils they annotate. Long grooves scoring ribs where enamel track through meat. Bite pits on limb girdles where leverage is best. V-shaped nicks on vertebrae that had the misfortune to be located near necessary. Shed teeth pepper the strata because biting reality has overhead, and replacement is a conveyor belt dream reptiles never stopped having. Up close, if you could stand it, the skull is all leverage and places for muscle to live. The temporal arches buttress a bite that doesn't need adjectives. The lower jaws meet in a long, fused handshake at the front because flex is a prey behaviour. The joint itself sits stout and low, engineered to keep its dignity when the rest of the world loses theirs. The neck is short. Torque goes straight from head to body to water. When the animal thrashes, it's not a tantrum, it's a decision about physics. You're waiting for it to make mistakes. Here's one. It is extensive. Big muscle costs, sprinting costs more. But Triassic seas run warm and busy, and size keeps heat like a habit. Call it mesothermy if you need something serious to say while you're being disassembled. What it means is simple. The engine runs hot enough, longs enough that ambushes stack into a lifestyle. The eyes keep performing in dim corridors because the bony ring keeps the optics from squishing into depression when the water squeezes. Smell? Strong enough to follow the chemical handwriting of a wound through a water mass that's busy lying about everything else. Hearing? Subtlety gets lost in a head this fortified, but who needs whispers when you can read outlines and pressure like scripture? The storm lesson comes early in the Triassic and never ends. Wind batters the surface into a sheet of hammered tin. Rain scribbles punctuation that means nothing to anyone but you. Carcasses lift from the slope. Gas-bloated reptiles. Fish that lost spets. The occasional slab of something new. The big hunter doesn't flail around like a tourist. It tacks diagonally across wind streets because scent concentrates at the edges, tests with quick, neat bites that look gentle until you realise gentle is relative, then invests only when the yield justifies the risk. Scavenging isn't beneath Apex, it's how Apex stays solvent during bad weather. Competition is less a fight than a timetable. Slender ichthyosaurs sprint for small prey and leave wakes shaped like arrogance. Nothosaurs patrol the margins, dragging the Triassic's idea of crocodile energy into water that's not fooled. Placodonts crush shells and pretend armor as a personality. When a carcass floats, everyone shows up. When a live Nothosaur flails, everyone backs off because the executive has clocked in. The big ichthyosaur takes its share from the place that ends arguments, hip, shoulder, mid-trunk, then leaves before drama becomes a bill. You try out survival strategies like a nervous comic testing jokes in a bad room. If you hold perfectly still, maybe it won't notice. You're a silhouette at an interface. Still silhouettes are the easiest ones to solve. If you sprint, maybe you can outdistance. You can't. One tail beat from that stiffened caudal stock converts stored promise into a wall. If you dive, the cold takes your breath and the eyes below get bigger in the way pupils do when a check finally clears. You're optimizing for feelings. It is optimizing for results. Even the babies arrive into efficiency. No clumsy egg fantasy on beaches these bodies can't reach. No awkward crawl past waves with hips that forgot how to be land. Live birth in the water, tail first, lungs last. Because destiny here is a suffocation and you beat it by seconds or you don't. The neonate is a miniature torpedo with hungry eyes and an instinct loadout titled immediately. There is no nursery lagoon draped in sentiment. The syllabus starts with swim and ends with continue. There's a day with good light when the whole animal writes itself across the surface for you. A low arc, a breath that looks like theft. The faint edge of the fluke briefly underlining the sentence before it fades. From above, counter shading erases the truth. Dark back dissolving into depth, pale belly into sky. From the side, the head keeps stealing the scene. That's where the Triassic spent its budget, on a skull that turns other predators into inventory. You get the foolish impression of grace, because it moves without splash. Grace is just efficiency that learned not to waste applause. Inside, the ledger balances line by line. Bone histology records steady growth, not boom-bust panic. Lamellae laid down like careful masonry, a biography of confidence in calcium. Pathologies pucker healed scars where a bad day tried and failed to become a final one. Coprolites glitter with pieces of animals that thought they were in the middle of their own stories. Fish scales like crushed stars. Belemnite hooks, bone grit where once there were ribs. Under museum lights, those flecks look festive. Up close, they read like itemized receipts. You can be something that belongs here for a minute if it helps you feel better about what happens next. Be a Nothosaur with forelimbs like oars, neck like an argument, hunting with that open-mouthed, scooping routine that works great on distracted fish. You lance forward, jaws agape, and the water wrinkles beneath your chest as if the sea itself rolled its eyes. The big ichthyosaur does not aim for your skull. It aims at the part of you that makes a twist lethal. Bite lands high on the trunk, head talks, tail locks the world. Your long neck, so dignified a moment ago, becomes leverage against your own attachments. The second bite is not mercy, it's logistics. Or be a juvenile ichthyosaur, all speed and opinions, flying the thermocline like you invented it. You swing wide to snag a fish that won't learn. The lane beside you solidifies into a moving idea. The head that materializes has a smile built into the bone and teeth that define commitment. Your sprint is a splendid plan, one half beat too late. The cut doesn't feel like a cut. It feels like the water acquired corners. There's a quiet arrogance in how early this thing arrives. Apex isn't supposed to be ready yet, not after the world's largest ecological fire sale, and yet here it is, a top-down hunter with the full kit. Hydrodynamic hull, hot engine, night vision optics, and knives where kindness goes in softer centuries. Its very existence is a status update from the planet. We are back to building tall food pyramids. Please stand by for consequences. Sometimes you'll catch the afterimage of a kill without the courtesy of a show. A swirl of oil widens into a bruise on the surface. A broken belemnite guard floats up like a pen that wrote too hard. A tooth, triangular with those clean-cutting margins, settles to the bottom to wait inside stone for a future ape to feel clever about recognizing patterns. Even absence is loud when something this thorough passes through. From above, the shelf steps out into deeper water the way a sentence steps into a clause. The lanes glide, warm over cool, fast over slow, and the executive patrols their intersections. It doesn't posture, it doesn't invent theatre, it wasn't designed for your attention, it was designed for return on effort. And in a sea that's rebooting faster than seems polite, that design is policy. The last thing you feel is the water firming up around you, as if the ocean briefly decided to be a hallway with walls and a door. The door is a mouth that opens a little wider than your imagination and closes like a verdict that never squeaks. The Triassic does not ask if you approve of its pace. It sends the message anyway, with bladed teeth and a body that learned very quickly how to make other bodies optional.